Chapter 12:26. The so-called moon ancestor's soul spring was actually not spring water but a pool of moonlight. Even though Ning Fan had clearly jumped into the spring water, he did not feel that it was real at all. Only the moonlight around him flowed like water, not drenching his clothes. There were also fine traces of chaotic chi mixed in the moonlight, which did not disperse. In that unreachable place, there was an endless amount of moonlight at the bottom of the spring. It was the source of all the moonlight in the illusory world. Ning Fan continued to descend at full speed. His speed was not to be underestimated. Even after descending for a distance of several hundred galaxies, he still felt that the bottom of the spring was unreachable. Clearly, the interior of this soul spring was a world of its own. Moreover, it was a vast and boundless world. Even with Ning Fan's rain technique fully activated, he could not see the boundary of this world at all. Approximately 1 hour later, Ning Fan stopped descending. His current position was already deep enough. The chaotic chi around him faintly exceeded his tolerance. Obviously, continuing to descend was not a wise choice. This is enough. Next, I just need to absorb enough chaotic chi to attain the initial stage of the 5 elements primordial chaos body. Ning Fan sat cross-legged in the moonlight and circulated the 5 elements primordial chaos body. All of a sudden, countless traces of chaotic chi glowed and flowed into his body. If the cultivators of the Yin-Yang sect saw this scene, they would certainly be surprised by Ning Fan's direct and violent actions. One should know that even the immortal emperors of the Yin-Yang sect had to be very careful when absorbing chaotic chi. How would ordinary cultivators dare to absorb so much chaotic chi like Ning Fan? At this rate, I will be able to attain the initial stage of the Great 5 Elements Primordial Chaos Body in at most 2 hours and obtain the physique of the 5 Elements Primordial Chaos Body. This is just the beginning. I still need a lot of hard work to truly achieve the Great Perfection Realm. Ning Fan completely immersed himself in his cultivation, forgetting everything that was happening outside of his body. As his cultivation progressed, his body began to undergo various changes. Sometimes, 3 chi magnetic light would spread out to protect his body. Sometimes, the supreme green light would turn into a green bird that hovered above his head. Sometimes, cold light would penetrate his body, as if he was going to turn into a block of ice. Sometimes, flames would burn his body, turning him into a ball of flames. In total, there were more than 400 different transformations on Ning Fan's body. Each of the transformations represented a type of physique that he could choose from. It was not that Ning Fan could choose whatever he wanted. Among the 400+ types of primordial chaos physiques, there were only 5 types of physiques that were compatible with him. It was not that he could not choose the other types, but they were not the most compatible with him. Therefore, it was very difficult for him to cultivate the physiques to the perfect perfection realm. Which of these 5 advancement paths should I choose? Ning Fan carefully sensed the differences between the 5 types of physiques he could choose from. The first physique was in line with his ancient Fey identity. When it was activated, the 5-colored Fey cloud would protect his body, and his defense was quite strong. Among them, the cloud art was something that he was interested in recently. The second physique seemed to be an offensive physique. When activated, one would be surrounded by primeval chaos lightning. Its destructive power was shocking and could make a quasi-saint look askance. The third type of physique pursued extreme speed. It could allow a cultivator's body to turn into a spirit of heaven and earth and fly, increasing their speed by more than 2 times. The fourth physique was an extremely rare treasure-holding physique. Once it was cultivated, the power of the treasures would be greatly increased. Ning Fan was most interested in the 5th type of physique. It was actually a type of physique that was related to the divine spirit. When it was activated, Ning Fan could clearly feel the uneasiness and nervousness of the divine spirit power in his body. This kind of uneasiness did not mean that the 2 types of physiques could not coexist. At least, they were compatible, making it possible for him to cultivate the 5th type of physique. However, the dignified waist divine spirit physique was actually frightened by an unknown primordial chaos physique. It was Ning Fan's first time encountering such a situation. One should know that other than the waste divine spirit physique, Ning Fan also cultivated many other types of physiques, such as the Great Five Elements physique, the Corpse Devil physique and the Six Desires bone. However, none of the physiques could threaten the divine spirit physique. It was because their levels were different. In other words, the fifth type of physique was actually a powerful physique that was on par with the waste divine spirit physique. In just a few breaths' time, Ning Fan had already made his choice among the 5 paths of advancement. As he progressed, 5 clouds of clear qi began to circle around his body. 4 of them were dark while the other was bright. The 4 clouds of dim qi did not have any power. They were just empty shells, as if they still needed to be filled with something before they could possess power. The only cloud of clear qi that was bright was filled with the power of the ancient divine spirit. That was why it shone with boundless divine light. 2 hours later, the 5 clouds of clear qi completely condensed. This meant that Ning Fan's primordial chaos physique had completely advanced. Ning Fan heaved a sigh of relief and opened his eyes. He looked at the 5 clouds of clear qi that were floating around his body with an inexplicable feeling. The jade slip that Senior Omniscient gave me didn't record this primordial chaos physique. Could it be that no one in the Yin and Yang sect had ever cultivated this type of physique? 5 clouds of clear qi, 4 of them are dark while the other is bright. The dignified power of the ancient divine spirit is actually only fit to fill one of the clouds of clear qi. Could it be that the other 4 clouds of clear qi need to be filled with the power of the same level? A sentence from the fake Tao scripture suddenly appeared in Ning Fan's mind. The 5 spirits of heaven and earth are gods, devils, demons, immortals and ghosts. In front of his eyes, the game of chess that he could not win no matter how hard he tried appeared again. On the chessboard, the gods, devils, demons, immortals and ghosts of both sides were fighting against each other. I seem to have cultivated the most useless yet most terrifying primordial chaos physique. It's useless because only one of the 5 clouds of clear qi has been lit up so far. Only by lighting up more than 2 clouds of clear qi can the hidden ability of this physique be preliminarily activated. I only managed to cultivate the divine spirit physique under various coincidences. It's as difficult as ascending to the heavens for me to cultivate the other 4 spirits to light up the second cloud of clear qi. But if there really comes a day when I succeed in cultivating this physique, perhaps I will become an existence that is even more terrifying than the ancient divine spirits. Ning Fan smiled, but he did not show too much expectation. He did not even know the name of the primordial chaos physique that he had cultivated. Then, he might as well ask. Communication of all living things, activate. Like a lunatic, Ning Fan stretched out his palm and spoke to it. Primordial chaos physique, tell me your name. Genesis primordial spirit physique, Genesis primordial spirit physique, Genesis primordial spirit physique, Genesis primordial spirit physique? I've never heard of it before. But it sounds really powerful. Unfortunately, it's too difficult to cultivate it to the perfection realm. Gathering all 5 spirits physiques is simply a fantasy. While Ning Fan was chatting with his palm, his eyes suddenly flickered and he stopped talking. At this moment, strange laughter suddenly resounded in the moonlight current around them. He. Teacher, look. There's an idiot over there who is chatting with his hand. Could it be that this idiot's brain has been damaged by the chaotic qi? Has he lost his mind? It seems like we don't need to do anything to expel him. He will be killed by the chaotic qi. Forget it. It's better for us to do something to expel him. After all, this is an important place of our clan. We can't let these rascals act rashly. Ning Fan frowned. When he first stepped into the bottom of the spring, he had already sensed the existence of some kind of special living being in this place. However, he did not take it to heart. His principle was that he would not attack unless he was attacked first. If the other party did not attack him, he would also ignore them. However, if the other party attacked him, he would not show them any mercy. Moon slash. A few illusory figures flashed across the current. Then, several traces of immortal venerable realm sword chi slashed at Ning Fan. All of them were crescent-shaped sword rays. Those sword rays were not worth mentioning at all. However, what was strange was that those sword rays could actually absorb the endless chaotic chi in this place to strengthen themselves. With the support of the chaotic chi, the mere immortal venerable realm sword rays actually possessed the power of the immortal emperor realm sword rays. Even Ning Fan did not dare to underestimate his opponent. He summoned the reverse sea sword and swung it a few times, shattering all of those sword rays. This guy is really strong. We can't defeat him. Teacher, hurry up and do something. A few anxious voices sounded. All right. All of you stand down. Let me kill this bastard. Great green lotus moonlight slash. Sizzle. All of a sudden, Ning Fan heard the sound of thunder coming from the current around him. It sounded like the sharp chirping of 1,000 birds. Then, those sounds of thunder gathered into one and condensed into a green sword ray that was 1,000 zhang long. It was like a green moon in the sky. It was an immortal emperor realm sword ray. However, after absorbing the power of the chaotic chi in the surroundings, its power was forcibly increased to the first level of the quasi-saint realm. These underwater creatures aren't strong, but their sword techniques are just too terrifying. Ning Fan's brows furrowed. The frown on Ning Fan's face deepened. It was not because the quasi-saint sword light was too powerful. Instead, it was because there seemed to be a trace of chi within the sword light that he found familiar, the chi of the sword ancestor. The chi of Ji Qingling. Why do the sword techniques of these underwater creatures carry that woman's chi? Could it be related to that woman? Boom! Ning Fan raised his sword and blocked the quasi-saint sword ray. The coldness in his eyes faded a lot. He did not like these underwater creatures who ambushed him. However, if they were related to that woman, it was not impossible for him to let them off. What? This bastard is actually so strong. Even my great green lotus sword technique can't do anything to him. Could it be that I have no choice but to ask the clan leader to kill him? The illusory figure of an old man who was dressed like a Confucian cultivator gradually materialized in the water. His face was filled with shock. Behind the old Confucian cultivator, a few young Confucian cultivators gradually appeared. Judging from the way they addressed him, they seemed to be his disciples. Be it the old Confucian cultivator or his disciples, none of them were alive. They were illusory sword spirits. They were not humans. They were sword spirits who had been guarding this place for generations. So they are sword spirits. Could they be her sword spirits? Ning Fan felt a pang of pain in his heart. In silence, he suddenly recalled the scene where the sword ancestor disappeared from his eyes. He also recalled the soul grass in the divine farmer's 100-herb garden that had yet to mature. Originally, he was not very interested in the moon ancestor's soul spring. Now, he began to care about it. He wanted to see what the bottom of the moon ancestor's soul spring looked like. That woman, did she come here before and leave some traces here? Stop. I don't mean any harm to you. The proof is that if I really want to kill you, I just need to use an illusion technique. There is no need for me to compete with you in sword techniques. Ning Fan sighed. The shadow of the reincarnation tree appeared in his right eye, pulling the old Confucian cultivator and his disciples into the illusory world of an immemorial rainy night. This old Confucian cultivator was just an immortal emperor while his disciples were just some sword spirits of immortal venerables. The reason why their sword techniques were powerful was only because of the sword techniques themselves and not because of themselves. With Ning Fan's current cultivation base, he could kill some sword spirits of immortal emperors and immortal venerables with just a glance using his illusion technique. The old Confucian cultivator was astonished. He was not an ordinary sword spirit. He was not afraid of illusions. However, he was still pulled into this place by Ning Fan's illusion technique. It was enough to show how amazing Ning Fan's attainment in illusion techniques was. Cold sweat involuntarily flowed down his face. However, he did not beg Ning Fan for mercy. Instead, he glared at Ning Fan arrogantly. I know that your illusion technique is powerful. Once you activate your killing intent, we will die instantly in your illusion technique. If you want to kill us, just do it. Don't talk too much. Someone will take revenge for me. Ning Fan was speechless. He clearly said that he did not mean any harm to these sword spirits. Could it be that they were deaf and couldn't understand him? Ning Fan shook his head and removed the illusion technique. The old Confucian cultivator was stunned. He could not figure out what Ning Fan was trying to do. What do you mean? Why don't you kill us? Are you really not here to hunt the sword spirits of the Green Lotus Sword? I feel like I've seen your chi somewhere before. When the old Confucian cultivator still wanted to ask more questions, a massive chi suddenly rushed towards him from the bottom of the spring. That was a quasi-saint. He was not a very powerful quasi-saint. He seemed to be a quasi-saint who had forcefully advanced through enlightenment. That was why his magic power was stuck at the bottleneck of the 10,000 tribulations and could not advance any further for the rest of his life. If they were in the outside world, Ning Fan would not be afraid of such a quasi-saint. However, this was a chaotic place. That person probably also knew sword techniques that could absorb chaotic chi. Therefore, even though he was just a weakling among the first-grade quasi-saints, it was highly possible for him to produce a sword light with the power of a second-grade quasi-saint. Facing this person, Ning Fan had no choice but to be on full alert. If there was any disagreement, he would have to fight a tough battle. It's our clan leader. He actually left the Green Lotus seat and came to save us. The old Confucian cultivator was deeply moved. Every time their clan leader left the Green Lotus seat, he had to pay a huge price. Save you? He. You are not in any danger. Why should I save you so many times? I'm here to welcome a distinguished guest. A green light flashed and turned into a thin old man who carried 7 swords on his back. This person's cultivation base was not high, but his sword intent seemed to have reached an extremely high level. Once he unleashed his full power, there were almost no first-grade quasi-saints who could match him. Distinguished guest? Where is the distinguished guest? There is only one intruder here. The old Confucian cultivator was puzzled. The old man with 7 swords did not want to talk nonsense with him. The old man only looked at Ning Fan with probing eyes. He studied him very carefully, as if he wanted to peel off every trace of Ning Fan's chi and examine it carefully. After a long time, the old man seemed to have confirmed something. Finally, he smiled and cupped his fists at Ning Fan. How should I address you, fellow Taoist? Ning Fan. Ning Fan said indifferently. I am Taoist 9 Swords. I would like to invite you to my residence for a chat. I wonder if you would like to come. The old man smiled. Where is your residence? The bottom of the Soul Spring. He. I don't have the confidence to go to such a deep place. If I make a mistake, I'm afraid I will be erased by the primal chaos and be consigned to eternal damnation. Ning Fan said with a smile. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to lie. When you saw that we have a trace of the sword ancestors' chi, you obviously want to go to the bottom of the soul spring to see the inheritance of the sword ancestor. As for the primal chaos chi at the bottom of the soul spring. He. The primal chaos chi there is indeed so dense that even second-grade quasi-saints don't dare to go there recklessly. However, you don't seem to be an ordinary person. If you really want to go to the bottom of the soul spring, you might have a way to do it. Besides, even if you really can't do it, our Green Lotus Sword clan also has a secret method to help you do it. The old man said meaningfully. Since you have already said so much, it would seem hypocritical if I still refuse. He. It's not hypocritical. You and I have never met before. It's reasonable for us to be cautious. However, fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry. I definitely don't have any ill intentions when I invite you to my residence. Instead, I have something to ask of you. It's also an opportunity for you. Before you, there were 4 Northern Heaven quasi-saints who visited my clan. There were also 6 other quasi-saints who harbored ill intentions towards my clan. That was why they were expelled by my clan. Fellow Taoist is the 11th Northern Heaven quasi-saint who came here. This way, please. Hold on. Before we go to the bottom of the soul spring, I still have a question to ask. What is it? Feel free to ask. The old man was stunned for a moment. Then, he regained his smile. Fellow Taoists, Tao name is 9 swords. Why do you only carry 7 swords on your back? Ning Fan asked meaningfully. It's a long story. In the past, we lost 2 of our swords in order to deal with the invading quasi-saints. Now, we only have 7 swords left. It's hard to make up for it. The old man said with a sigh. I see. Ning Fan nodded, as if he agreed with the old man's explanation. However, deep inside his heart, he was a little wary of this old man. This person did not tell him the truth. With Ning Fan's eyesight, he could tell that the 9 sword technique that Taoist 9 swords practiced was actually 7 real swords and 2 illusory ones. From the very beginning, there were only 7 real swords. The other 2 were divine swords that did not manifest themselves during normal times. The 9 swords and 7 swords were related to the secret of this person's divine ability. It was normal for him to be unwilling to tell Ning Fan the truth. However, it was a little too much for him to deliberately make up a lie. This person was treating him hypocritically. Since he was not sincere, it was hard to say if he did not have other schemes. Well, it doesn't matter. Whether he is a friend or a foe, we will know once I make a trip to the bottom of the soul spring. Did Qing Ling really come here before? With Ning Fan's current state, it was extremely difficult for him to dive to the bottom of the soul spring while enduring the chaotic qi. Of course, if he activates his primordial true body and uses other techniques, he might be able to do it. However, Ning Fan did not reveal his techniques in front of Taoist 9 swords. Instead, he accepted the latter's help. The 2 of them continued to dive while chatting. Only then did Ning Fan learn that the Green Lotus Sword clan lived at the bottom of the Moon Ancestors' soul spring. This clan did not have a lot of members. There were less than 1,000 of them. Each of them was a sword spirit. Due to some reasons, the sword spirits of this clan could not leave the Moon Ancestors' soul spring. Once they leave the chaotic qi, they would die. Similarly, when they are in the primordial chaos, the power of their sword techniques would often far exceed their cultivation base. They were incomparably powerful. Once, those quasi-saints of the Northern Heaven who were plotting against this place were defeated. They were living beings who lived in the primordial chaos. To them, the chaotic qi was like water to fishes and air to mortals. It was harmless to them. However, an outsider like Ning Fan would not be able to do the same. He had to be very careful when entering the primordial chaos. In order to help Ning Fan dive to the bottom of the soul spring, Taoist 9 swords had no choice but to transfer a large amount of the sword spirit's power to Ning Fan to protect him. After diving for an unknown amount of time, an ethereal voice suddenly resounded in the water under the hazy moonlight. It was unknown where that voice came from, but it seemed to have merged with the moonlight. That voice was filled with endless longing. It was the voice of a woman. That voice sounded very familiar. It was clearly the voice of the sword ancestor. The only thing that disappointed Ning Fan was that the voice was not in the language that was commonly used in the cultivation world. Instead, it was a dialect of a certain place. Thus, he could not understand it very well. However, he could vaguely tell that it was a very sad ballad. The snowflakes of 7 Apricot City are flying, the person I am waiting for is wandering, who is this song under the moon for? I woke up from a dream in the middle of the night, my tears dyed the candlelight red, butterflies fly quickly to the faraway place. I don't understand. Ning Fan did not understand a single word of the dialect. However, there was still an inexplicable feeling in his heart that he could not get rid of. Through this song, he seemed to see tall mountains, flowing rivers, and a certain woman who sat on the peak of a mountain since ancient times. Her fingers stroked an ice-cold long sword as she stared at the moon and moon alone for 10 years, waiting for someone to come. Fellow Taoist, could it be that you understand the language of the Yu clan of the desolate ancient immortal realm? Why don't you tell me what this song is about? I have listened to this song for countless years but I have never understood its meaning. Taoist Nine Swords said with surprise. Fellow Taoist, you've misunderstood. I know nothing about this language. It turns out that this is the language of the Yu clan of the desolate ancient immortal realm. This is the first time I've heard of such a language. Ning Fan seemed to be immersed in the song and was stunned for a moment. Then why are you sad? Taoist Nine Swords still did not believe him. Ning Fan shook his head without answering. All of a sudden, he heard that the song around him disappeared. He suddenly felt lost. This song has existed in this place for countless years. It will only appear on the day when the tide rises and the moon is full. If fellow Taoist wants to listen to it again, you just have to wait until the next tide rises. Taoist Nine Sword explained. I see. Ning Fan nodded and collected all his emotions. He was even more certain that this place was related to the Sword Ancestor. Otherwise, how could the Sword Ancestor's song be passed down to this day? He continued to dive deeper and deeper. After diving for an unknown amount of time, a huge shadow suddenly appeared below him. It was an abandoned cultivation planet with a bumpy surface. It was actually at the bottom of the spring. No, it was not accurate to call it a cultivation planet. It was not a planet but a moon that had lost all its light. It was a real moon. A dead moon that had sunk here for countless years. It's actually a moon. There's actually a moon in the illusory world. Ning Fan was very surprised. It was Ning Fan's first time seeing something like a sun and a moon. How could he not be surprised? Even though it was just a moon that had been dead for many years, it still gave him a great shock. The Green Lotus Sword clan was built on this abandoned moon. On the surface of the moon, there were countless withered trees. Those trees seemed to be the remaining roots of giant lotuses after they withered. The Green Lotus Sword clan used the trees as their cave dwellings. Every member of the clan absorbed the moon, lotus and primal chaos chi here to cultivate. When they saw an outsider, they were shocked. However, when they saw that Ning Fan was accompanied by their clan leader, they were relieved. Each of them whispered softly. Is there another guest? I guess this is the fifth quasi-sage who has successfully arrived in our clan. This person doesn't seem to be as strong as the previous four. He actually needs the help of the clan leader to reach the bottom of the spring. I wonder if this person can help our clan completely obtain the Sword Ancestor's inheritance. With Ning Fan's senses, he naturally heard the whispers of the sword spirits but he did not care about them. His eyes were attracted by a lotus seed pod that was as huge as a mountain. It was a lotus seed pod that had withered for countless years. The lotus seeds on it had long been taken away by someone. There were dried blood stains on the dried lotus seed pod. Those were the blood of the Sword Ancestor. There was also an ancient sword mark on the dried lotus seed pod. It was a ghastly sight. Even now, there was still a sword intent that could not be looked at directly. She was injured in this place before. Ning Fan could not help but feel a sense of anger. It was like a volcano that had just awakened and erupted in his heart. If I find out who hurt her, if fellow Taoist has good eyesight. You actually recognized the Sword Ancestor's natal green lotus among the thousands of dried lotuses at first glance. Taoist Nine Sword clicked his tongue and praised. Natal green lotus? Ning Fan concealed all of his emotions and said indifferently. Rumor has it that the Sword Ancestor had once lost her natal green lotus in this place. The reason is unknown. That natal green lotus was the condensation of the Sword Ancestor's Tao teachings. Even though it has been destroyed, it is still very valuable to second-step cultivators like us, who destroyed her green lotus Tao teachings. Ning Fan suddenly asked. Heir. Taoist Nine Sword was stunned. He did not understand why Ning Fan would ask such a question. However, in order to temporarily maintain a good relationship with Ning Fan, he still answered patiently. There is no way to verify this. Our Green Lotus Sword clan only gained sentience in the later generations. We don't know much about those ancient secrets. We only know that this dried lotus contains the Sword Ancestor's Tao teachings. Speaking of that Tao teachings, fellow Taoist should have seen some of them. Some of the sword techniques of our Green Lotus Sword clan were comprehended from it. Just as Taoist Nine Sword was getting excited, he was once again interrupted by Ning Fan's strange question. Do you have any of her old belongings here? Her old belongings? Hee. Of course not. Taoist Nine Sword narrowed his eyes. He thought to himself that this Ning Fan was really greedy. He wanted to ask for the treasures left behind by the sword ancestor as soon as they met. Of course, there were some of the sword ancestor's old belongings here. However, those things all belonged to the Green Lotus Sword clan. Why should they give them to an outsider? Even if this person seems to have some abilities and I can make use of him, I will just make use of him. It is impossible for me to give him too much in return. Are you sure you don't have anything? I hope fellow Taoist won't lie to me. Ning Fan's eyes flashed with cold light and he said in a threatening tone. Hee. Why would I lie to you? Taoist Nine Swords' face was smiling but his heart was filled with anger. Despite his identity, he was actually treated in such a manner by a mere devil. If it wasn't because of Ning Fan's value, he would not mind killing this ancient devil. If that's the case, you can tell me your purpose now. Ning Fan withdrew his cold light and said indifferently. If I'm not mistaken, fellow Taoist should be an ancient devil, right? To tell you the truth, in order to break open the lotus pod and obtain the sword ancestor's Tao inheritance, I need to borrow some of the ancient devil's power. No, to be exact, I need the blood of an ancient devil. After all, among the three cultivation systems of the divine, demon and devil, the blood of the devil race is the purest. It's just right for me to water the lotus pod. Fellow Taoist, you won't reject my request, right? Taoist Nine Swords said with a half smile and a half threat. His purpose was to borrow half of Ning Fan's devil blood to water the sword ancestor's natal green lotus. However, which normal person would use their own blood for others? Especially since it would cause great harm to one's body. It was something that everyone would hesitate to do. Taoist Nine Sword was certain that Ning Fan would not agree to it. If he disagrees, he would probably use some force to force Ning Fan to comply. This place was already the bottom of the spring. The chaotic chi here was unimaginably dense. As the sword spirit of the Green Lotus, the denser the chaotic chi around him, the stronger his strength would be. On the other hand, Ning Fan was an outsider. Without his help, he would not even be able to survive in this place. He would be directly killed by the chaotic chi. He had the confidence to not put Ning Fan in his eyes even though he was suspected to be a quasi-sage. If it wasn't for the fact that the process of watering the devil blood required the guidance of the ancient devil personally, Taoist Nine Sword would not even bother to consider Ning Fan's wishes and directly kill him to extract his blood. I see. So this is your purpose. Ning Fan had long been wary of this person. Thus, he was not surprised when he realized that the other party was plotting against him. As long as fellow Taoist offers half of your devil blood to water the lotus pod, I guarantee that I will let you go after this is done regardless of whether it succeeds or not. Besides, once it succeeds, I'm willing to give you some of the sword ancestor's Tao inheritance. What if I refuse? Hee. Forgive me for being blunt. Since fellow Taoist has already followed me to the bottom of the spring, it seems like you don't have any leeway to refuse. Taoist Nine Swords said with disdain. Since that's the case, let me think about it. Of course, Ning Fan did not really want to think about it. He suddenly sensed some changes in the Spirit Nong's 100-herb garden. Thus, he needed some time to investigate it. He walked straight to the bottom of the dried lotus pod and sat on the ground. Then, he divided his consciousness into the Spirit Nong's 100-herb garden to observe the changes of the sword ancestor's soul grass. For some unknown reason, the sword ancestor's soul grass which grew slowly actually showed signs of accelerating growth after coming to this place. Could it be that the natal green lotus that the sword ancestor destroyed in this place is actually the best nourishment for the soul grass? It can accelerate the recovery of the sword ancestor's soul. If that's really the case, I might have to feign civility with this Taoist Nine Sword. As long as it can help her, it doesn't matter even if I have to sacrifice half of my devil blood. Chapter 12:27. In the end, Ning Fan agreed to Daoist Nine Swords' request and offered half of his devil blood to water the Sword Ancestor's natal Green Lotus. The Green Lotus Sword clan wanted to resurrect the Sword Ancestor's natal Green Lotus and obtain its inheritance. Ning Fan also wanted to resurrect the natal Green Lotus and return the inheritance to the Sword Ancestor's soul grass so that it could grow. Daoist Nine Sword thought that he had successfully coerced Ning Fan, but he did not know that it was exactly what Ning Fan wanted. Seeing Ning Fan reluctantly compromise, Daoist Nine Sword felt pleased inwardly. However, he did not show it on his face and returned to his initial friendly smile. I'm very pleased that fellow Daoist has made the wisest choice. No matter whether it succeeds or not, fellow Daoist is still a friend of my Green Lotus Sword clan. Friend? Hee. I don't need a friend like the Green Lotus Sword clan. Ning Fan did not agree with him. However, on the surface, he still had to pretend to be helpless and resentful. Let's cut the pleasantries. Hurry up and finish watering the devil blood, then let me go. I don't want to stay here for a second longer. Hee. Fellow Daoist, don't be anxious. If you want to carry out the resurrection ceremony, just the devil blood isn't enough. You still have to wait for another fellow Daoist to help. Before that fellow Daoist arrives, I'll have to trouble you to wait for a while. Daoist Nine Swords smiled mysteriously. He took out an ancient coin and crushed it. It seemed like he was sending a message to someone far away by crushing the coin. All right. That person will definitely arrive in an hour at most. This is the agreement we made in the past. Daoist Nine Swords said confidently. He deeply believed that the owner of the coin would not dare to not come. After all, he also had something on the other party. Humph. It seems like I'm not the only one being threatened by fellow Daoist. Ning Fan seemed to be very indignant, but his real emotion was surprise. The chi on the coin seems to be familiar. It seems to be the Pure Yang ancestral master of the Pure Yang sect. Strange. Isn't that Pure Yang ancestral master staying in the heaven avoiding coffin to prolong his last breath? Why would he be involved with the Green Lotus Sword clan all of a sudden? Hee. Fellow Daoist, please calm down. It's true that my Green Lotus Sword clan offended you first, but so what? To put it bluntly, if you didn't covet the fortune here, you wouldn't have fallen to the bottom of the spring and been schemed against by this old man. As a cultivator, who hasn't suffered a few setbacks? Fellow Daoist, there's no need to take it to heart. Guards. Daoist Nine Sword no longer bothered with Ning Fan. Instead, he summoned a few of his clansmen and whispered some instructions to them. Before long, more than 100 burly men of the Sword Spirit clan carried a yellow wine jar that was as large as a mountain to the front. This is... Ning Fan secretly released his sense. He had already found out what was inside the wine urn. However, he still asked despite knowing the answer. Fellow Daoist, you're the first true elder devil that I've waited for countless years. However, fellow Daoist, the blood of the ancient devil ancestor is too little. It seems like there are only 4 drops. That is not enough. So, therefore, I want to help you, fellow Daoist, to condense more ancient demon ancestral blood. In this wine urn, there are 300 drops of the blood of the pseudo-ancient devil ancestor that I've collected after hundreds of millions of years of painstaking planning. I've used hundreds of millions of years of hard work to brew it into wine. Even though it's not the orthodox ancient devil blood wine, it's still a rare treasure. If an orthodox ancient devil drinks all of this wine, he or she can at least obtain 10 drops of ancient devil ancestor blood. I've offended you in the past. Therefore, I'll use this wine to compensate you. Daoist Nine Sword pretended to be generous and said. Compensate? Fellow Daoist's words are really nice. You've only mentioned the benefits of this wine, but you've concealed its flaws. If I'm not mistaken, this wine is obviously brewed by extracting the primordial chaos essence. How domineering is this wine? When one drinks it, it's like drinking the primordial chaos essence raw. it will certainly cause great damage to the person who drinks it. Those quasi-saints with slightly weaker qi and blood would probably explode and die before they can even finish 1/3 of this wine. You're asking me to drink this wine. You've got ulterior motives. Ning Fan said coldly. Humph. Now that you're trapped in my Green Lotus Sword clan, do you still have a choice to not drink it? Could it be that fellow Taoist wants to refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? Taoist Nine Swords' expression instantly changed. He pretended to remove the sword's spirit power that he had placed on Ning Fan's body. Ning Fan's expression immediately changed greatly. If the sword's spirit power in his body disappears, the primordial chaos qi at the bottom of the spring would immediately rush towards him. Fellow Taoist, why do you have to do this? I'll just drink this wine. Ning Fan said with an unpleasant expression. Inwardly, however, he was trying to hold back his laughter. This was the wine that Taoist Nine Sword had spent hundreds of millions of years to brew. After drinking it, he would be able to increase his ancient devil ancestor blood significantly. Hee hee. That's right. Fellow Taoist, don't worry. I naturally understand that this wine will cause great harm to you. I won't let you drink too much of it. Fellow Taoist only needs to drink 1/5 of it. Where are the beauties? Hurry up and serve fellow Taoist Ning the wine. As Taoist Nine Sword gave an order, more than 10 beautiful figures immediately walked out. All of them were beauties of the Green Lotus Sword clan. Of course, these beauties were also sword spirits. Each of them had already lost their primordial yin. No one knew who had plucked their primordial yin. The group of beauties set up a table and chairs for Ning Fan. Then, they urged him to drink wine in a charming manner. All of them were using spatial wine utensils. A small bottle of wine contained 500 jin of wine. However, Ning Fan just put on a helpless expression and drank very slowly. He seemed to hate this pseudo-ancient devil blood wine very much. However, this was also human nature. Which ordinary person would have the time to drink the primordial chaos wine? Even if this wine brought great benefits to ancient devils, there were probably not many second-step ancient devils who would dare to drink 500 kilograms of it. Fortunately, Ning Fan was not an ordinary person. He was a divine spirit with a crippled divine body. In the first place, he was stronger than ordinary ancient devils. Moreover, because he knew the cultivation method of the 5 elements chaotic primordial body, he was quite experienced in absorbing the power of the primordial chaos. Thus, even if he drinks the primordial chaos wine raw, he would not suffer any harm. However, he could not let Taoist Nine Sword notice it, hence, every time Ning Fan drank some of the blood wine, he would have to pretend that he had suffered great injuries and cough out some blood. That blood was, of course, a disguise. Even so, Taoist Nine Sword was secretly shocked. His heart was filled with suspicion because the amount of blood Ning Fan coughed out was less than what he had expected. Strange. After drinking the primordial chaos wine, the backlash he suffered is much lighter than what I had imagined. Why is that so? Could it be that the physical body of an orthodox ancient devil is so strong that it has some resistance against the primordial chaos qi? Unfortunately, Taoist Nine Sword had never seen an orthodox ancient devil before. Thus, he certainly could not confirm his speculation. He could only keep an eye on Ning Fan and did not dare to underestimate him anymore. Good wine. It's really good wine. Even though this Taoist Nine Sword has a bad character, his winemaking skills are really top-notch. Besides, this wine can actually improve the grade of my devil blood. It's really impressive. Ning Fan clicked his tongue in admiration towards the blood wine in his heart. However, he still had to pretend that he was forced to drink it. Secretly, the grade of his devil blood was improving by leaps and bounds. Originally, his devil blood was only at the grade of 4 drops of ancestral blood. He had only condensed 1/3 of the 5th drop of ancestral blood. Now, however, the 5th drop of ancestral blood was gradually being completed at an astonishing speed. Strange. This young man has only drunk 30,000 liters of blood wine, but he is already showing signs of condensing the fifth drop of ancestral blood. Taoist Nine-Sword frowned. This was somewhat different from what he had expected. Initially, he thought that even an orthodox ancient devil would need to drink at least 50,000 liters of blood wine to condense the fifth drop of ancestral blood. After all, not all the blood wine that enters one's stomach could be successfully converted into medicinal power. There would always be a lot of waste. Would it be so easy to absorb the blood wine that contained the power of the primordial chaos chi? It would already be difficult for ordinary quasi-saints to absorb 1/4 of the medicinal power. However, Ning Fan was different. He had the primordial chaos body technique. Thus, he did not waste too much of the power of the primordial chaos chi. Thus, the effect of consuming the blood wine at this moment was naturally much more obvious than the others. This was also because the power of the ancient gods and ancient devils were not interconnected. Otherwise, if the heart aperture of the ancient gods could also produce the same effect, the improvement of his devil blood would be truly heaven-defying. I get it now. This young man is already close to condensing the fifth drop of ancestral blood. That's why he only drank 30,000 liters of blood wine and he managed to condense the fifth drop. However, if it's the sixth drop, it won't be so easy to condense it. Taoist Nine-Sword came to a sudden realization, thinking that he had found the reason. Just as expected. After Ning Fan successfully condensed the fifth drop of ancestral devil blood, he drank 200,000 liters of blood wine in a row, but he still could not condense the sixth drop. It seemed like the difficulty of condensing the sixth drop of ancestral devil blood was more than 1,000 times greater than the fifth drop. It seems like my guess is right. The reason why this young man can condense the fifth drop of ancestral devil blood so quickly is just a coincidence. Taoist Nine-Sword felt relieved. He did not like things to go out of his control. However, he did not know that he was deceived by the illusion that Ning Fan deliberately created this time. After drinking 30,000 liters of blood wine, Ning Fan had already condensed 1/3 of the fifth drop of ancestral devil blood. After drinking another 60,000 liters of blood wine, he also successfully condensed the sixth drop of ancestral devil blood. After another 50,000 liters of blood wine, the seventh drop of ancestral devil blood was also successfully condensed. Fortunately, Ning Fan noticed Taoist Nine-Sword's surprised expression. He understood that his ability to absorb the blood wine was indeed a little scary. It would expose his ability to restrain the power of the primordial chaos and make his enemies wary. Thus, he put on some disguises. Even though he had already successfully condensed the sixth and seventh drops of ancestral devil blood, he suppressed his fluctuations and did not let others know about it. In Taoist Nine-Sword's eyes, he even thought that Ning Fan had encountered many difficulties in condensing the sixth drop of ancestral devil blood. The cultivation of ancestral blood was difficult, especially for the ancient devil clan which had been deprived of the right to obtain ancestral blood. If it wasn't for Ning Fan swindling Taoist Nine-Sword's wine by chance, it would be extremely difficult for him to continue increasing the amount of ancestral devil blood. The higher the amount of ancestral blood, the more difficult it would be to cultivate. Ning Fan drank a total of 140,000 liters of blood wine and only managed to condense the eighth drop of ancestral devil blood. For the ninth drop, he used 170,000 liters of blood wine. The 10th drop, 200,000 liters. Oh! This young man has finally condensed the 7th drop of ancestral devil blood, huh? That's enough. If he continues drinking it, I'm worried that his body will explode and he will die from the power of the primordial chaos. If that happens, there won't be anyone to water the devil blood anymore. Taoist Nine-Sword nodded his head in satisfaction. With a wave of his hand, he stopped the beauties from urging him to drink and ordered his people to move the wine urns away. However, he did not know that Ning Fan had already condensed the 10th drop of ancestral devil blood at this moment. What he saw was just an illusion that Ning Fan had created. Phew. Finally, I don't have to drink this blood wine anymore. Ning Fan's face was pale and weak. He heaved a long sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Of course, his complexion and expression were all faked. Deep down, he felt that it was a pity. He still wanted to drink more blood wine. Why did Taoist Nine Sword withdraw? Could it be that he had noticed his disguise and was prepared for it? Fine. I'll think about the matter of the blood wine later. The most important thing now is to resurrect Qing Ling's orthodoxy and nourish the soul grass with its power. I'm sorry. Taoist Nine Sword pretended to be guilty and cupped his fists at Ning Fan, as if he was apologizing for forcing Ning Fan to drink the blood wine. In reality, he did not feel sorry at all. Instead, he was mocking Ning Fan for being weak and easily bullied. Humph. 1 hour has passed. The other fellow Taoist should have arrived by now, right? Ning Fan said in an annoyed tone. Soon, soon. While Taoist Nine Sword was comforting Ning Fan's emotions, he suddenly saw a ray of pure sunlight silently shining into the moonlight world at the bottom of the soul spring. Then, he changed the topic. Hee hee. Fellow Taoist Ning, you don't have to wait any longer. Fellow Taoist Lu is already here. That ray of pure sunlight arrived without a sound, hiding itself from the eyes and ears of the entire vast cold palace. When that ray of light landed on the world at the bottom of the spring, it transformed into the pure young ancestral master. Ning Fan naturally recognized the pure young ancestral master. He had once attacked the pure young sect to denounce them. That was how he got to know this person. Even his pure refinement art was bought from this person. In his impression, the pure young ancestral master was a greedy person who was afraid of death. 9 out of 10 of his sentences were related to the heavenly Tao metal. Moreover, due to his fear of death, he hid inside the heaven-avoiding coffin of the pure young sect all day long. There was a time when even the juniors of the sect did not know that there was such a great being who was still alive in their sect. Although he was greedy for money, he was also an extremely talented person at the same time. The heaven-avoiding coffin that was famous in the northern heaven was invented by him. If it wasn't for the heaven-avoiding coffin, the overall strength of the northern heaven would not be so much stronger than the other 3 heavens. It was all thanks to him. At the same time, the pure young ancestral master was also a titled cultivator who held the title of God of Wealth. His creed was that money can make a god. At this moment, the pure young ancestral master was surrounded by countless illusory figures of money, giving people a feeling that he was impenetrable. Even the primordial qi at the bottom of the spring could not hurt him at all. Ning Fan was confident that he could also achieve such a level of defense. However, he would definitely need to use all of his means. In the past, he seemed to have underestimated the strength of the pure young ancestral master. Even though he was just a first-level quasi-saint, he was definitely one of the extremely heaven-defying ones, eh? Why is fellow Taoist here as well? Could it be that the ancient devil blood-gushing demon that the Green Lotus Sword clan found is you? As soon as the pure young ancestral master arrived, he saw Ning Fan and was instantly shocked. I've entered the tiger's den by mistake. I have no choice but to do so. Fellow Taoist, please excuse me. Ning Fan smiled bitterly. Oh. Fellow Taoist Lu knows this fellow Taoist Ning. Taoist Nine Sword was slightly surprised, but he did not find it strange. It was too normal for the 2 old monsters of the northern heavens to know each other. It would be strange if they did not know each other. Humph. What does it have to do with you whether I know Brother Ning or not? The pure young ancestral master could still put on a good expression when facing Ning Fan. However, he was not polite when facing Taoist Nine Sword. The atmosphere became a little awkward. Fortunately, Taoist Nine Sword also understood that he was the one who threatened the pure young ancestral master first. It was only normal for the other party to have some complaints. Of course, he hated the pure young ancestral master's rudeness. However, it was not like he could not tolerate it before he finished using the other party. Speaking of which, I only found out a few days ago that fellow Taoist's surname is Ning and not Zhao. According to the rumors, fellow Taoist should be in the Lost World Palace now. Why did you come here all of a sudden? Oh right, fellow Taoist, have you thought it through? Do you want to buy the remaining few pure refinement arts? If you buy all of them, I can give you some discounts. As expected, the pure young ancestral master always talked about the heavenly Tao gold. He wanted to earn Ning Fan's money again. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the pure young ancestral master was shocked. He was just promoting his pure refinement art out of habit. However, after taking a closer look, he realized that the purity of Ning Fan's magic power was no longer the same as before. The few pure refinement arts that he bought in the past were almost completed. Isn't this fellow's magic power purification speed a little too fast? At this speed, he really needs to buy more pure refinement arts as a backup. The pure young ancestral master was inwardly shocked. When he looked again, not only did the purity of Ning Fan's magic power increase tremendously, even the quantity of his magic power had increased by a lot. His cultivation base was already at the 17,000 tribulation realm. With Ning Fan's current cultivation base, even if he uses his full strength to fight Ning Fan, he would at most have a 30% chance of winning. There was a 70% chance that he would lose. Then, here comes the problem. Why would Ning Fan, who was much stronger than him, fall into the Green Lotus Sword clan and be controlled by a mere Taoist 9 sword? Could it be that this young man is the same as me? Both of us are putting on an act and feigning civility with Taoist 9 sword. We'll talk about the deal of the pure refinement art later. Let's talk about the proper business first. Fellow Taoist, did you come here to revive this Green Lotus Tao inheritance? Ning Fan asked with a smile. That's exactly why I came here. I'm ashamed to say this. Due to some reasons, I once went out to visit the Tao. During that time, I accidentally entered this place to explore. Due to a moment of carelessness, I left behind some information that could be used against me. Now, I have no choice but to obey their orders. Sigh. The pure young ancestral master sighed. Fellow Taoist, why didn't you stay in the heaven-avoiding coffin? Instead, you went out to visit the Tao and even accidentally entered this place to explore? Ning Fan said meaningfully. This sentence was actually transmitted to him through telepathy. The pure young ancestral master that he knew was both talented and shrewd. How could he be coerced by someone for no reason? There must be a great reason behind it. It was highly possible that the other party did it on purpose. Didn't fellow Taoist also enter the tiger's den by mistake? The pure young ancestral master also transmitted his voice to Ning Fan meaningfully. The two of them only needed to exchange glances to know that the other party had ulterior motives towards the Green Lotus Sword clan. I wholeheartedly want to revive this Green Lotus Tao inheritance. I hope that fellow Taoist will not interfere. Ning Fan withdrew his smile and transmitted his voice again. Then I'll have to trouble you. I also want this Green Lotus Tao inheritance. Can't you share some with me? The pure young ancestral master also withdrew his smile. What if I say no? Fellow Taoist, you really have a big appetite. Do you really want to keep the Sword Ancestors Tao inheritance for yourself? I'll be frank with you first. Without the power of my title of fortune, you won't be able to revive the Sword Ancestors Tao inheritance with just that bit of devil blood of yours. Since I'm contributing to it, I naturally have to share some of the Tao inheritance. Ning Fan frowned. Since Taoist 9 Sword had gone through so much trouble to find the pure young ancestral master, the power of his title was most likely an indispensable item in order to revive the Green Lotus Tao inheritance. Without this person, the Green Lotus Tao inheritance would not be able to be revived. According to Ning Fan's personality in the past, it was not impossible for him to have a share of the fortuitous encounters that he had with the pure young ancestral master in the past. However, he could not do so this time. This was Qing Ling's Tao inheritance. He would not share it with anyone. It's strange. With fellow Taoist's personality, it seems like you shouldn't have such a deep obsession with worldly possessions. The pure young ancestral master frowned. He indeed needed the power of the Sword Ancestors Tao inheritance, but it was not a must. If Ning Fan insists on taking everything for himself, he could only let go. After all, he was no longer Ning Fan's match if they really fight. However, he had been plotting against the Green Lotus Sword clan for many years. It was impossible for him to give up on this matter just like that. 5,000 gold ingots. The pure young ancestral master suddenly smiled and offered a price. His intention was obvious. As long as Ning Fan pays him 5,000 taels of heavenly Dao gold, he would give up the Sword Ancestors' Dao inheritance in this place. If Ning Fan refuses to pay, he could just leave even if he could not defeat Ning Fan and not help Ning Fan to revive the Sword Ancestors' Dao inheritance. What? You're saying that he is being threatened by Daoist Nine Sword and cannot leave on his own? Stop joking. How could he be threatened by a mere quasi-saint? Would he, Lu Chunyang, be afraid of a mere Green Lotus Sword clan? Alright. Even though 5,000 gold ingots was a lot, this matter was related to the soul grass of Qingling. When it was time to spend money, Ning Fan would certainly not be reluctant to spend it. He still needed the pure young ancestral master's power to revive Qingling's Dao inheritance. As long as the pure young ancestral master facilitates this matter, it was not impossible for him to pay him some money. Hiss. You're willing to pay me so much money. How refreshing. This little brother admires you even more now. The pure young ancestral master was overjoyed when he heard Ning Fan's words. Even though the Sword Ancestors' Dao inheritance was precious, he was not a sword cultivator. He only wanted to borrow some of its power. However, if Ning Fan was willing to pay him 5,000 gold ingots, he could achieve his goal with other means even if he did not obtain the Sword Ancestors' Dao inheritance. What Daoist Nine Sword did not know was that Ning Fan and the pure young ancestral master had reached a private agreement to divide the Sword Ancestors' Dao inheritance in this place. Seeing that the two of them kept talking to each other through telepathy, Daoist Nine Sword could not help but let out a few dry coughs to interrupt their conversation. Alright. If the two of you want to have a chat, you can find another time. Since fellow Daoist Lu is already here, it's time to carry out the ceremony to revive the Green Lotus Dao inheritance. Someone, set up the sacrificial altar. As Daoist Nine Sword gave his order, the entire Green Lotus Sword clan immediately became busy. Not long after, a temporary sacrificial altar was set up. Daoist Nine Sword personally presided over the sacrificial altar. At the center of the altar was the Green Lotus Dao inheritance that had died countless years ago. Fellow Daoist Ning, please go to the Green Lotus Dao inheritance and water it with your devil blood. If I don't tell you to stop, you can't stop. Fellow Daoist Lu, please use the power of your title to change the fate of the Green Lotus Dao inheritance. When you succeed, I will naturally remove the Green Lotus Sword curse in your body. The pure young ancestral master nodded his head and began to circulate his power of the title to save the Sword Ancestor Green Lotus. Even though Ning Fan had yet to give him the 5,000 gold ingots that he had promised, he knew cultivators like Ning Fan very well. He firmly believed that as long as the other party made a promise, he would not go back on his word even if it meant his death. After receiving money from others, he would help them eliminate disasters. Even though the pure young ancestral master was greedy, he was also a man of his word. Since he had agreed to help Ning Fan obtain the Sword Ancestors' Dao inheritance, he would do his best to make it happen. However, there is one thing that I don't understand. The amount of devil blood needed to water the Sword Ancestor Green Lotus is not a small matter. It will at least consume half of this person's devil blood. Even with my help, the success rate will not be more than 30%. Even if it succeeds, the Sword Ancestors' Dao inheritance will only be resurrected to a certain extent. It's definitely not complete. It can be said that it's useful or useless. It depends on the person. This Xiao Jian is definitely not a sword cultivator. This matter cannot be hidden from my eyes. Since he's not a sword cultivator, why is he so persistent about this Sword Ancestors' Dao inheritance? Could it be that this Xiao Jian is the same as me, a handsome man with a story? The pure young ancestral master fell into deep thought as if his memories had been triggered. For a moment, his eyes became a little dazed. In his daze, he seemed to see the lady who had turned into a flying bird waving goodbye to him before she left. She was so determined, stubborn and reckless, little Yang, in order to protect the stone warrior 8 formations that my father left behind, I must become eternal. After I'm gone, you have to take good care of yourself, elder sister In Rong, I don't want you to die. Can you please come back? I haven't told you my feelings, sigh. A sigh escaped from the pure young ancestral master's mouth. It was filled with bitterness but no one noticed it. He collected all the distracting thoughts in his mind and released more of his tidal power. The illusory figures of money that blotted out the sky and covered the earth went into the withered green lotus. They were untraceable and unimaginable. It's time. Fellow Taoist Ning, what are you waiting for if you don't offer your blood now? Taoist Nine Sword urged. Ning Fan ignored Taoist Nine Sword. At this moment, the withered green lotus was the only thing left in his eyes and in his world. Using his fingers like a blade, he made a cut. Devil blood immediately gushed out from his arm and poured onto the withered green lotus. He could not allow the devil blood to be used as he wished. The most important thing was how the owner of the devil blood guided the devil blood. Following Taoist Nine Swords' request, Ning Fan began to smear the devil blood on his palm and spread it evenly on the entire green lotus. Before Ning Fan transformed into a human, his mother had also used her blood to smear the demon cocoon to save him. At this moment, Ning Fan only felt that his action of smearing the devil blood was very similar to that incident. There seemed to be some kind of hidden karma involved in it. As Ning Fan's devil blood flowed into the green lotus, the withered green lotus that was originally withered suddenly showed a hint of vitality. That vitality was very weak. However, at the moment when it was revealed, endless thoughts broke out of the lotus and spread across the entire world at the bottom of the spring. There was also a woman's intermittent voice that seemed to have transcended the ancient times. It sounded like she was murmuring but he could not hear it clearly, "Little butterfly. My little butterfly. I won't let you die. Even if I have to give up this sword, I won't. Avakania is the Tao. What you cannot seek is fate. What I cannot meet is you. What I cannot think of is you. What I cannot destroy is me. But now, I am willing to give up everything. I have no regrets. I will give you the chance to be born a human even if I no longer exist in this world. When you become a human, I will use this sword and this scabbard to turn into my parents to protect you and give you the warmth of this world. I will use the desolate mountain to look at the moon and give you a lifetime of moonlight. I will use all the smiles in this life to accompany you. It's a pity that I won't be able to see all of this. Did I pour rain on your heart? Unfortunately, this time, I can't hold an umbrella for you, hee hee. This is the voice of samsara left behind by the sword ancestor when he came to this place in the past. We don't have to pay attention to it. Even if we listen to it, we won't be able to hear it clearly. Taoist Nine Sword explained. Don't have to pay attention to it, but if I want to pay attention to it, Ning Fan felt lost. He could not hear what the sword ancestor had said in this place in the past. He only felt an inexplicable sense of loss and sadness. The rain in tent around him turned into thousands of raindrops as his emotions were revealed, sprinkling on the entire moonlight world at the bottom of the spring. The karma between him and the sword ancestor was so deep. However, he knew too little about the sword ancestor's life. She was like a mystery, she was like a silhouette living in the moonlight. She came and went again and again and again, so this time, I must make her stay. Even if I only keep a trace of her remnant soul and a stalk of soul grass, I will not allow the heavens to take it away. Time passed slowly. Ning Fan's chi gradually became weaker. After all, he had lost such a large amount of blood essence. Even if he was a divine spirit, he could not bear the burden. He had already watered the lotus with 1/3 of his blood essence. However, the life force that the withered lotus gave him was still pitifully little. This made Ning Fan very disappointed. The difficulty of reviving the sword ancestor's orthodoxy was obviously much higher than what everyone expected. Seeing this, Taoist Nine Swords' expression turned extremely ugly. According to this progress, even if he drains all of Ning Fan's devil blood, it would still not be enough to revive the sword ancestor's orthodoxy. It seems like I can only give up. These 5,000 taels of heavenly Tao gold are too difficult to earn. Pure Young Ancestral Master sighed. Suddenly, his expression changed greatly. At this moment, Ning Fan offered a drop of ancestral-level devil blood and watered it on the green lotus. It was the ancestral blood, and it was the ancestral blood of an ancient devil that was the most difficult to cultivate. Only a madman would pay such a price to revive a green lotus that had withered for many years. Ha ha ha. Good. Good. Good job. Taoist Nine Sword was overjoyed. He did not care whether Ning Fan was crazy or not. It couldn't be better that Ning Fan was willing to give up his ancestral blood to water the green lotus. Now, he did not have to force him. Out of the 10 drops of ancestral devil blood, there were only 9 drops left. Just 1 drop of ancestral blood was still far from enough to revive the sword ancestor's orthodoxy. Then, I'll use the second drop. If 2 drops aren't enough, I'll use 4 drops. If 4 drops aren't enough, I'll use all of them. Hiss. This young man really hid himself well. I thought he had only cultivated 7 drops of ancestral devil blood, but I didn't expect him to cultivate 10 drops. I've underestimated this young man too much. Taoist Nine Sword was both surprised and delighted. He's crazy. He's crazy. 10 drops of ancestral devil blood. This madman has sacrificed 10 drops of ancestral devil blood. Does he know what 10 drops of ancestral devil blood mean to an ancient devil? Pure Young Ancestral Master was deeply touched. He somehow understood Ning Fan's current madness. It was because he was once as crazy and obsessed as Ning Fan. For the first time in his life, the way Pure Young Ancestral Master looked at Ning Fan was not as if he was looking at a fat sheep. Instead, his eyes were filled with admiration and seriousness. Even though I don't know why this young man is so crazy, I know that it must be because of something more important than his life. Ha ha ha. What a great Tao monarch Ning Fan. I've actually underestimated you in the past. If cultivators of our generation lack this madness and obsession, it's fine if we don't cultivate our Tao. Since you want to be crazy, I'll accompany you. How can I accept 5,000 gold taels from you for nothing? He broke the titled void. The Pure Young Ancestral Master was really generous. He actually summoned the titled void and used the collapse of the void in exchange for the divine power of money to forcefully change the fate of the green lotus. The fate of the green lotus was supposed to be extinct. However, the Pure Young Ancestral Master actually managed to turn a trace of its vitality around. As such, when Ning Fan smeared the ancestral devil blood evenly, the green lotus finally began to break free from its withered state. It emitted thousands of rays of green light. Countless green lotuses bloomed in the world of moonlight. They looked illusory and real at the same time, dyeing the entire world of moonlight into a blue sky. The reason why the blue sky was dyed with devil blood might not necessarily be for slaughter. The primal chaos green lotus might not necessarily be for eternity. Ning Fan gritted his teeth and endured the waves of weakness coming from his body. Looking at the blooming green lotus in the world of moonlight, he finally revealed a smile. Even though it was just a trace of resurrection, he actually managed to resurrect a trace of the sword ancestor's destroyed Tao inheritance. As long as he gives this trace of Tao inheritance to the soul grass, it will certainly grow a lot. Ha ha ha. The revival of the sword ancestor's Tao inheritance is in sight. Fellow Taoist Ning, fellow Taoist Lu, my green lotus sword tribe no longer needs you too. You can scram now. If you dare to covet it, don't blame me for killing you. Taoist Nine Sword laughed out loud. Ha ha ha. Pure Young Ancestral Master also laughed. He was laughing at Taoist Nine Sword's foolishness. The revival of the Green Lotus Sword clan is in sight. Ha ha ha, it should be destruction. The Pure Young Ancestral Master did not know why Ning Fan was so obsessed with the Sword Ancestor's Tao orthodoxy. However, he knew everything. Anyone who dared to snatch something from a devil should be prepared to die. Daoist Nine Sword had no idea how powerful it was. He turned into a streak of sword light and headed straight for the green lotus, wanting to retrieve it. However, before it could get close to the green lotus, it was forced back by Ning Fan's immense baleful qi. What a monstrous killing karma! What a domineering Tao will! This item belongs to me, Ning Fan. I will kill whoever dares to snatch it from me. Chapter 1228. Hiss. What kind of killing was this? The land of the northern heavenly profound gate actually gave birth to such a demon. In the face of Ning Fan's monstrous baleful qi, Daoist Nine Sword, who was a dignified quasi-saint realm Daoist, actually felt a chill penetrating his body. He could not help but take tens of steps back as if he was avoiding a ferocious beast. However, the shock only lasted for a moment. Daoist Nine Sword quickly composed himself and thought to himself, so what if this kid's aura is frightening? This was the bottom of the moon ancestral soul spring. This was the territory of the Green Lotus Sword tribe. In this old man's territory, even if you are a true dragon, you still have to obediently coil up. Order. Daoist Nine Sword gave an order and withdrew the power of the sword spirit that was protecting Ning Fan. Without the protection of the Green Lotus Sword clan, the primordial qi at the bottom of the spring immediately locked onto Ning Fan with killing intent. The concentration of primordial chaos here was too high, and all sorts of primordial chaos transformations could already be seen. Amidst the deafening rumbles, the primordial qi in the surroundings turned into the shadows of thousands of immemorial mountains and fell from the sky. In the next moment, it turned into an illusory primordial ocean, engulfing Ning Fan. That immemorial mountain was enough to make an immortal emperor vomit blood. Even a sage-to-be would have to dodge when thousands of them fell at the same time. That primordial ocean was enough to drown the great Daos of the heavens. Once he was swept into the sea, his Tao insight would sink to the bottom of the sea forever. However, all of these were not reasons for Ning Fan to compromise. Qing Ling's Tao legacy, the verdant lotus, was right behind him. He would not give it up to anyone. Forget about the illusory ancient mountain and the primordial sea. Even if the immortal emperor of the true world truly used the primordial mountains and seas to suppress him, he would not lower his head. Ning Fan summoned the ocean-defying sword. His eyes were filled with monstrous devil intent. One sword strike could shatter 1,000 mountains. If it spat out the flame thunder fire, even the great desolate sea would be evaporated. Seeing that the illusory mountains and seas could not hurt Ning Fan, the power of the chaotic primordial qi in the surroundings increased tremendously. It began to form layers of mysterious heavenly Tao lines. Those lines grew in number and in the end, they actually condensed into a massive palm print. The palm print descended from the sky, seeming to be able to tear apart primordial chaos, its might unfathomable. Many northern heaven quasi-sages had tried to explore the bottom of the soul springs, but in the end, they were repelled by the palm lines formed by the primordial qi. The palm print was so terrifying that only second-level quasi-sages would dare to take it head-on. Humph! Ignorant child. Today, I will teach you how terrifying the primordial chaos realm is. Daoist Nine Sword was waiting to see Ning Fan suffer a setback. All of a sudden, his expression changed drastically. 100 swords. Ning Fan unleashed all of his magic power. In the blink of an eye, he slashed 100 times at the palm mark and actually shattered it into pieces. After the primordial qi was shattered, it still wanted to attack Ning Fan again. However, Ning Fan was one step ahead of it. The current Ning Fan was already very different from when he first entered the Soul Spring. He had already cultivated the 5 elements mixed primordial body and was extremely resistant to the primordial qi. Ning Fan circulated the cultivation method in his body accordingly. He actually began to swallow the primal chaos qi around him in huge gulps. You're crazy. This is primordial chaos, this is. Daoist Nine Sword was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Even the pure young ancestral master was shocked by Ning Fan's action. They were at the bottom of the spring and not the upper layer of the soul spring. The density of the primordial chaos here was extraordinary. Even ancient great cultivators would not dare to devour the primordial chaos here. This brat actually dared. Ning Fan did not even bother to look at Daoist Nine Swords' shocked expression. He only focused on doing one thing. Tun tun tun. His nature was that of a devil. His devil Tao was to use toughness to conquer toughness. He wanted to destroy all the primordial chaos chi in this place in the most brutal way possible. Stop. Stop right now. You can't devour all the primordial chaos in this place. This is another pillar of my Green Lotus Sword Clan's revival. Didn't you hear me telling you to stop? Daoist Nine Sword was enraged. The first sword was finally unsheathed. It was a low-grade innate sword. A flying sword of this level was not enough to attract Ning Fan's attention. However, the one who controlled the sword was Daoist Nine Sword, the quasi-sacred sword spirit. Even though the treasured sword was weak, its sword spirit was extremely strong. It made the power of this sword almost invincible among low-grade innate magic treasures. The sword soared into the sky. The sword light suddenly turned into 100,000 rays of moonlight, sprinkling down on Ning Fan. It was a very beautiful sword move. However, it contained monstrous killing intent. The 100,000 rays of moonlight were not formed by the scattered sword light. Instead, they were formed by the sword making 100,000 sword slashes at Ning Fan in an instant. 100,000 sword slashes were made in an instant. Even Ning Fan found it a little difficult to dodge the speed of the slashes. This sword technique must contain a trace of the principle of time in order to achieve such an unimaginable speed. Chi. In everyone's eyes, Ning Fan seemed to have been turned into a sieve by the 100,000 sword lights. However, strangely enough, no blood flowed out. I actually hit him. This young man is really weak. Daoist Nine Swords' face was filled with joy. He did not expect Ning Fan to be so easy to deal with. But soon after, he couldn't smile anymore. Ning Fan, who had been stabbed by him 100,000 times, actually began to wither. Eventually, his color faded and he became a withered tree ant. Then, a cold voice suddenly came from behind him. Do you feel so happy after injuring my clone? Bang! An unimaginable fist force suddenly came crashing down, directly flattening Daoist Nine Swords' face. His teeth were broken and blood spurted out from his mouth. Then, he was sent flying. Surprisingly, Ning Fan had used his tree demon clone to dodge the 100,000 slashes and counterattacked with the ancient Devil Mountain breaking strike. Daoist Nine Sword was sent flying for several thousand zhang away before he managed to stabilize his body with difficulty. He stared at Ning Fan in disbelief. Even though he was just a quasi-saint realm expert, the body of his sword spirit was tempered to the point that it was not weaker than a quasi-saint realm expert. Given the strength of a quasi-saint realm expert's physical body, his face was actually flattened by someone else's punch. The fist force of this person was just too terrifying. You're actually a body cultivator. Daoist Nine Sword exclaimed in shock and anger. However, as soon as he said those words, he felt that he had said something useless. Since this young man was an ancient devil, he was certainly a body cultivator. It was not strange at all for him to have such fist force. Are these the only injuries you have? Ning Fan said emotionlessly. Without activating his eternal true body and executing consecutive attacks, the ancient Devil Mountain breaking strike really did not pose much of a threat to a quasi-saint realm expert. It actually could not even injure a quasi-saint realm expert who received the ancient Devil Mountain breaking strike. Since that's the case, I'll just activate my eternal true body. Eternal true body, activate. Cross-shaped halo, activate. Without giving Daoist Nine Sword any time to be surprised, the ancient Devil Mountain breaking strike that was like a storm had already arrived at him. Not good. Second sword, unsheath. The characteristic of Daoist Nine Sword's first real sword was its extremely fast speed. The second sword was a defensive sword. The body of the sword was like a shield and its sword chi was extremely strong. In an instant, the sword transformed into 3,000 layers of chi walls, protecting Daoist Nine's sword. One had to admit that the defense of this second sword was really strong. Even the 800 ancient Devil Mountain breaking strikes could not penetrate its chi wall defense. However, when Ning Fan's punches became stronger and stronger, reaching the destructive power of 3,000 consecutive strikes, the defense of this sword finally began to waver. Boom! The 3,000 chi walls only lasted for tens of breaths before they were pierced by Ning Fan. Daoist Nine's sword's second real sword along with his first real sword were all shattered into pieces by Ning Fan. Even he himself was like a withered leaf in the storm of punches. He was constantly being hit and destroyed. The ancient Devil Mountain breaking strike was just too stimulating for a quasi-Saint Realm expert like him. Daoist Nine's sword was terrified. If he still does not do anything, he would definitely be blasted to death by Ning Fan's random punches. 7 Stars Sword Formation, Protective Heavens. Daoist Nine's sword summoned the remaining 5 real swords and formed an illusionary sword formation to protect his surroundings. Only then did he barely manage to block Ning Fan's torrential attacks. Unfortunately, he had used this sword formation too late. At this moment, 2 of his real swords had already been destroyed by Ning Fan. There were only 5 swords left that could be used to form the formation. The power of the sword formation was already much weaker than before. Fortunately, this sword formation could also absorb the primordial chi to strengthen its defense. Under the enhancement of the primordial chi, the defense of Daoist Nine's sword formation had more than doubled. Even the 8,000 ancient Devil Mountain breaking strikes could not break the barrier of the formation. Huff. That was close. I was almost killed by this young man. How despicable. Let me show you the power of my sword formation. This formation is not just for defense. It also has more than 100 million variations. As long as I turn the formation it will turn into a supreme killing formation. Before Daoist Nine's sword could finish his nonsense, he suddenly lost his voice in fear. Ning Fan saw that his forceful attacks on the sword formation were ineffective. He immediately withdrew his fists and stepped on golden flames, walking towards the sword formation step by step. Every step that Ning Fan's giant body of golden flames took would leave an indelible golden flame footprint in heaven and earth. He did not seem to be walking between heaven and earth. Instead, it was as if he was walking on the veins of heaven and earth. Every step that he took was actually the key to the great momentum of heaven and earth. When he took 9 steps in an instant, the entire heaven and earth began to shake and become unstable. Bang! Bang! The great momentum of heaven and earth collapsed under Ning Fan's footsteps. Without the support of the great momentum, the sword formation naturally collapsed. How could it survive alone? The powerful sword formation that could defend against the 8,000 ancient Devil Mountain breaking strikes could not withstand Ning Fan's 9 steps heaven-trampling strikes in the end. When the sword formation collapsed, Daoist Nine's sword's remaining 5 real swords also collapsed at the same time. At this moment, all 7 of Daoist Nine's sword's real swords were destroyed. The only things that he could rely on were his 2 divine ability swords. Ning Fan, you and I are sworn enemies. Daoist Nine's sword was infuriated. He had spent hundreds of millions of years to refine the 9 swords that had 7 corporeal swords and 2 void swords. Today, however, Ning Fan had destroyed 7 of his real swords. His divine ability was greatly damaged. How could he not be filled with hatred? When the rage in his chest continued to fill up, Daoist Nine's sword finally met the condition to activate his eternal true body, which he had not used for a long time. His eternal true body was a special true body. It could only be activated under certain conditions. The conditions to activate a special true body were different. Daoist Nine's sword needed to accumulate enough rage in order to activate his true body. At this moment, he had fulfilled the condition. What Daoist Nine's sword cultivated was actually the Buddhist true body. His true body was a glaring Vajra who was standing on a green lotus throne. 2 rays of sword light flashed like lightning in the eyes of his true body. Those 2 swords were the only 2 divine ability swords that he had left. My 8th sword is called Golden Light Glaring. It contains the rage that I have been fighting against fate for my entire life. No matter what, I will bring the Green Lotus Sword clan out of this world at the bottom of the spring. My clan was born in the primordial era and will die in the primordial era. If we leave the primordial era, we will certainly die. However, if we absorb the power of the Sword Ancestors' orthodoxy, we might have a chance to live in the outside world. For this matter, I will not give up the Sword Ancestors' orthodoxy to anyone. No matter how strong you are, you won't be able to do it. Roar, Daoist 9 Swords Anger Sword to the sky. The 8th ray of sword light in his left eye turned into blazing flames and flew out of his left eye, aiming at Ning Fan. It was a sword of wrath. This sword had accumulated the wrath of Daoist 9 Sword for hundreds of millions of years. If this sword slashes the dantian of a quasi-saint, the flames on the sword would be enough to wipe out the primordial spirit of a quasi-saint instantly. It was extremely dangerous. Of course, such a powerful sword must have a flaw. The flaw was that this sword could only be used once. After that, it would definitely dissipate. In his rage, there was also a belief that he must lead his clan to the outside world no matter what. Unfortunately, Daoist 9 Swords' belief could not shake Ning Fan's determination to fight for the Green Lotus sect. Daoist 9 Sword had his reasons for not backing down, but Ning Fan had the same reason as well. Fighting and killing for the sake of their beliefs was the destiny of cultivators. Rain Dragon, swallow this sword for me. Facing Daoist 9 Swords' menacing 8th sword, Ning Fan suddenly gave an order. The rain intent of heaven and earth immediately condensed into a 3-zhang long rain dragon. The body of that rain dragon was not huge and it did not seem to be imposing at all. After it was summoned by Ning Fan, it yawned lazily as if it was not interested in anything in the world. It had a strong personality. However, when Daoist 9 Swords' wrath sword light slashed at it, the eyes of the rain dragon suddenly lit up. Battle intent surged in its eyes. Then, it roared into the sky and directly opened its mouth, swallowing Daoist 9 Swords' wrath sword light. The wrath on the sword could even wipe out the primordial spirit of a quasi-saint instantly. Yet, a small rain dragon actually dared to swallow it. This scene was really unimaginable. Even the gigantic dragons under the command of the Rain Master would not dare to swallow such a powerful sword light, as they would certainly die if they did so. What was strange was that Ning Fan's 3-zhang rain dragon actually did not die after swallowing such a powerful sword light. It just rolled on the ground and wailed in pain. That was all. The wailing and rolling on the ground only lasted for 10 breaths. After that, the pain in the rain dragon's body subsided. It had actually digested the 8th sword light that was formed from Daoist 9 Swords' wrath. Burped out, the rain dragon let out a comfortable burp. Then, it happily circled around Ning Fan's true body of golden flames as if it was called out by its master to play with it again. The pure young ancestral master was dumbfounded. Daoist 9 Swords seemed to have suffered a huge blow and was directly petrified. Who would have thought that such an earth-shattering sword light would actually be easily blocked by an inconspicuous little dragon? This was just like a dream. Impossible. Daoist 9 Sword finally let out an indignant roar. What exactly is that 3-zhang rain dragon? Why did it swallow his wrath so easily? He did not believe that this was real. This is the source of Tao art. A living being that was formed from the source of Tao art is almost immortal. That's why it dared to swallow such a powerful sword technique. The source of Tao art. He has actually come into contact with a trace of the source of Tao art. The pure young ancestral master took a closer look and found some clues. Then, he was deeply shocked because the source of Tao art was too profound. Even he found it difficult to step into its doorstep. However, Ning Fan could do it. However, at the same time, he felt a little strange. Why does Ning Fan's rain dragon look so similar to the dragons that True Monarch North Sea raised? It should just be a coincidence. After all, True Monarch North Sea's rain dragon has yet to reach the level of the source of Tao art. It could not swallow a sword technique of this level. Of course, the pure young ancestral master did not know that Ning Fan's rain dragon was really snatched from true monarch North Sea. However, Ning Fan's rain dragon was far stronger than true monarch North Sea's. It was because true monarch North Sea only possessed the power of the rain title. However, after Ning Fan cultivated the rain palm position, he also devoured some of the power of the rain title. The palm position and the rain title were of the same origin but were different. When the two of them were combined, they would form the source of Tao art. Living beings with divine abilities that were created from the source of Tao art usually had the characteristic of immortality. Ordinary means could not harm them. Ning Fan's rain dragon was such a case. Even though its body was small, it was much stronger than true monarch North Sea's rain dragon. I refuse to accept this. Daoist Nine Sword roared at the sky as if he had gone mad. He had been planning for his entire life so that his people could get out of the soul spring. Just as he was about to achieve his wish, an obstacle like Ning Fan appeared. Even the eighth sword could not kill Ning Fan. What else could he do? The only sword technique he had left was the ninth sword. The eighth sword was the condensation of his anger in his entire life. The ninth sword was the condensation of his entire life's anger. If he uses this sword technique, he will certainly die. However, if his death could help him kill the outsiders in this place and help his people obtain the orthodoxy of the sword ancestor, then his death would be meaningful. This is my ninth sword. Once this sword technique is used, I will certainly die. Fellow Taoist Ning, fellow Taoist Lu, you two are too much of a hindrance. Follow me to the nine nether yellow spring. At this moment, Taoist Nine Swords' blood essence turned green. Then, with a loud bang, his flesh and blood exploded. The spirit body of his sword spirit was destroyed. His flesh and blood turned into a towering green blood. When the green blood condensed, it turned into a 1,000 zhang large sword. The tip of the sword locked onto Ning Fan and the pure yang ancestral master. This was Taoist Nine Swords' life-risking attack. He swore to kill all the outsiders in this place and fight for a future for his people. Clan leader. Stop it now. Countless members of the Green Lotus clan knelt on the ground and cried bitterly. Their situation was pitiful and sad. They only had themselves to blame. The pure young ancestral master's expression changed drastically. In a flash, he appeared beside Ning Fan and said anxiously, "You've underestimated the Nine-Sword Taoist sect. This person is even crazier than you and me. He used his life to transform into a sword. The power of this sword can severely injure a second-level quasi-saint. Let's go now." The pure young ancestral master wanted to pull Ning Fan away, but Ning Fan did not plan to leave. The evil intent in his eyes faded away and he looked at the sword light which Taoist Nine Sword had transformed into with his life. Ning Fan did not like Taoist Nine Sword's shrewdness and character. However, he did not expect that Taoist Nine Sword would actually do something that he acknowledged in the end. This person was also quite a character. As the clan leader, you dare to sacrifice yourself for the future of the clan. From this point of view, you're quite qualified to be the clan leader. Unfortunately, there is no right or wrong in the matters of cultivation. There are only different standpoints. You and I are destined to be enemies and not friends. The only thing I can do is to send you to your death with my strongest attack. Ning Fan seemed to be murmuring to himself. At the same time, he also felt like he was talking to his enemy, Taoist Nine Sword. He wanted to use his strongest attack to respond to Taoist Nine Sword's life-risking sword attack. Escape? There was no need for that. The Rain Dragon was eager to give it a try. At the same time, it was a little afraid. It seemed like it wanted to help Ning Fan devour this sword attack to gain some merit. However, it also faintly felt that if it devoured this sword attack, the origin of its Tao art would be destroyed. Ning Fan did not order the Rain Dragon to attack. Instead, he withdrew it. With a point of his finger, the entire world at the bottom of the spring was covered by the void rain. With another point of his finger, countless gigantic trees grew out of the void rain. It was actually the power of the wood divine spirit domain that overlapped with the void rain. Fellow Taoist Nine Sword, you've always been wrong about one thing. This place isn't the home ground of your Green Lotus Sword clan. As long as I want to, any place can become my home ground. Under the nourishment of the void rain, the boundless gigantic trees began to grow at an insane rate. This was not the power that the wood domain originally possessed. It was a qualitative change that was formed after it merged with the void rain. Water and wood. The nature of rain and wood complemented each other, causing the power of the wood domain to increase exponentially. In this wood domain, Ning Fan was the well-deserved monarch. Even a second-level quasi-saint would find it hard to defeat him in his domain. Die! Taoist Nine Swords' unwilling voice reverberated between heaven and earth. Then, his ninth sword attack turned into countless green swords and rained down on Ning Fan like a rainstorm. Rumble, countless wooden walls rose from the ground, protecting Ning Fan from all directions. Taoist Nine Swords' life-risking sword kept destroying the gigantic trees that were blocking his way. Under the nourishment of the rain, the gigantic trees grew again and again. There was no end to them. After an unknown period of time, Taoist Nine Swords' sword light finally began to weaken and dissipate. When everything calmed down and the smoke and dust dispersed, Ning Fan stood on the ruins of countless gigantic trees, unscathed. Taoist Nine Swords' life-risking sword attack could not do anything to him in the end. Our clan leader has lost. Even his life-risking sword attack can't hurt this man at all. The entire Green Lotus Sword clan was in a daze and fell into despair. When the nest is overturned, how can the eggs remain intact? As soon as their clan leader died, most of them would not be able to continue living. The palm seed of rain and the palm seed of wood which have come into contact with a trace of the origin of Tao law. The pure young ancestral master was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. He had never thought that Ning Fan was actually a cultivator with multiple palm seeds, which was one of the few in history. This was because he could not recognize the divine lattice of wood and mistook it for the palm seed of wood. If he knew that Ning Fan possessed a divine lattice that was 3 grades higher than the palm seed of wood, he would probably be even more shocked. This is the full strength of this young man. Initially, I thought that I would have a 30% chance of winning against him. Now, it seems like I barely have a 10% chance of winning against him. The pure young ancestral master smiled bitterly. After a bitter smile, he felt a hint of pity. Unfortunately, he only found out in the end that Taoist Nine Sword, whom he looked down upon in the past, was also a real man. He somewhat admired Taoist Nine Sword's boldness, but that was all. There were too many respectable enemies on the path of cultivation. Even so, a battle was inevitable in the end. What Taoist Nine Swords seeks is the future of the clan. I wonder what this young man is fighting for. The pure young ancestral master looked at Ning Fan inquiringly. Ning Fan did not answer him. He just dispersed his various abilities and indifferently walked towards the remaining members of the Green Lotus clan. As soon as they saw Ning Fan approaching them, their faces turned pale with fear. They felt that a great disaster was about to befall them. Is he trying to eliminate the root of the problem? A real man must be ruthless. I can't blame this young man for being ruthless. The pure young ancestral master thought to himself. Ning Fan did not exterminate the entire clan as he had imagined. He just casually asked the members of the Green Lotus clan. I heard that the members of the Green Lotus clan will never be able to leave this region. Why yes. The members of the Green Lotus clan seemed to have seen a glimmer of hope and answered respectfully. Then just stay here and live well for your clan leader. All you want is to break the seal of this place and go to the outside world. However, you don't know that the sea of blood in the outside world is thousands of times better than this place. To the outside world, this place is no different from a paradise. It's really sad if you don't know that you're living in bliss. There will always be people who want to live a better life. But what is a better life? Ning Fan rarely spoke so much. Perhaps the matter regarding Daoist Nine's sword had touched his heart. That was why he said a few more words to give these members of the Green Lotus clan some advice. The members of the Green Lotus clan wanted to go to the outside world and see the vast and boundless Soul Spring world. They wanted to see the starry sky outside. The immortal cultivators of the illusory dream world had been pursuing the giant gate of infinite wasteland. They wanted to pass through the gate and go to the true world. There was nothing wrong with being curious. There was nothing wrong with wanting to live a better life. However, it was equally important to cherish everything that they had now. Ning Fan raised his eyes and looked at the sky. He looked at the world of moonlight. His exhausted heart deeply envied the peaceful life of the members of the Green Lotus Sword clan. He was actually not interested in longevity or cultivation. He just wanted to stay in Seven Apricot City and live a peaceful life with his friends and family. The values of those who live in battles and those who live a peaceful life were different. It was not a question of right or wrong. It was just because he didn't have it that he wanted to obtain it. That was why he was curious about it. Ning Fan heaved a sigh of relief and got rid of all the distracting thoughts in his mind. He no longer cared about the members of the Green Lotus clan in this place and began to collect the inheritance of the Green Lotus sect. Naturally, no one dared to stop him. Countless members of the Green Lotus clan knelt on the ground and cried tears of joy, thanking Ning Fan for sparing their lives. Some members of the Green Lotus clan even kowtowed to Ning Fan 3 times and kowtowed to him 9 times. They were afraid that if they kowtowed too little or were not sincere enough, Ning Fan would change his mind and not let them live. It was no wonder that these members of the Green Lotus clan regarded Ning Fan as a kind person for 10 generations. The members of the Green Lotus Sword clan plotted against Ning Fan first, but Ning Fan was able to turn a big problem into a small one and let bygones be bygones. Who else could be so magnanimous if they were not a kind person for 10 generations? As for the battle between Ning Fan and the clan leader, it was just a battle between cultivators. There was nothing that could be done about it. Both of them fought fair and square. There was no doubt that Ning Fan was not a kind person. Even the pure young ancestral master was a little surprised. Everyone in the world thought that Ning Fan was some kind of Tao to perfected sovereign, but he saw through Ning Fan's evil nature. He knew that Ning Fan was a devil lord who committed heinous crimes. How could he be considered as a kind person? Even such a devil lord would have times where he did not kill him. Of course, he would be surprised. Deep in Brother Ning's heart, it seems like, you hate killing. The pure young ancestral master asked a question that even he himself did not quite believe. In this world, will there be someone who likes killing for its own sake? If that person likes killing for its own sake, then that person is not worthy to be called a human. There was once a person who told me this. Go up the mountain to be an immortal and go down the mountain to be a human. Mortals dream of becoming immortals, but they don't know that becoming an immortal means killing. It means that they have no choice but to do so. The period when they are a human is the happiest period of their life. Ning Fan casually answered while keeping the Tao inheritance Green Lotus. Go up the mountain to be an immortal and go down the mountain to be a human. The pure young ancestral master only heard a rumbling sound in his ears as if he was listening to the voice of the heavens. This sentence actually described the sea of blood in the cultivation world and the essence of immortals. He really wanted to know what kind of person could come up with such a sentence. Since he was curious, he naturally asked casually. Ning Fan, however, did not answer him. Everything related to immortal sovereign Zido was a great secret of heaven and earth. He did not want to talk about it with others. Finally, the Tao inheritance Green Lotus was completely kept by Ning Fan. When Ning Fan kept the entire Tao inheritance Green Lotus into the divine farmer 100 Herbs garden, it directly turned into a ray of light and flew into the ancestral sword's soul grass. After that, the ancestral sword's soul grass continued to grow. Eventually, it actually grew into a blooming green lotus. As soon as the lotus bloomed, it actually looked like a woman. She was passing through time and space and smiling at Ning Fan. Ning Fan felt inexplicably sad when he saw her and he did not dare to look at her any longer. The lotus, on the other hand, wanted to look at Ning Fan more. It was very cheerful and swayed with the wind as if it was dancing. What a pity. After absorbing such a large amount of power of the Tao inheritance, it only grew from a soul grass into a lotus. It's still far from being able to condense the azure spirit soul. Ning Fan let out a long sigh. Although he didn't do it in front of the pure young patriarch, the scene of him using his orthodoxy to cultivate the soulgrass was still predicted by the pure young patriarch with the power of Qian Neng. You've gone mad. You've gone mad. You actually paid such a price to obtain the sword ancestors' Tao inheritance just to grow flowers. You're really the most serious love-struck fool in the world. The pure young ancestral master really wanted to cry. He risked his life to accompany Ning Fan. In order to help Ning Fan resurrect the sword ancestors' Tao inheritance, he even broke the titled void space. He was still wondering what kind of extraordinary reason Ning Fan had to be so crazy. It turned out that it was just to grow flowers. How did you know what I did? Ning Fan frowned slightly. He did not like to be foreseen by others. It would make him feel very insecure. However, his brows loosened and he shook his head with a smile, sighing at the unfathomable means of the pure young ancestral master. In the end, he did not tell the pure young ancestral master more about the azure spirit. After all, the pure young ancestral master had helped him a lot by reviving the green lotus Tao inheritance. Even though it was just a deal, it also made him have some friendly relations with the pure young ancestral master. Since that was the case, he was too lazy to make a fuss about the fact that this person managed to foresee some of his secrets. This is the reward that you and I agreed on. Ning Fan flipped his hand and a storage pouch appeared in his hand. He then handed it to the pure young ancestral master. The pure young ancestral master received the storage pouch with a smile. How could he not know that it contained heavenly Tao gold? However, when he saw the amount of heavenly Tao gold in the pouch, his old face immediately turned black. He was unhappy. It was not because Ning Fan had given him less heavenly Tao gold. It was because Ning Fan had given him more. Why did you give me 10,000 taels of silver? The pure young ancestral master was displeased. The agreement between them was clearly 5,000 taels of silver. In order to help me, fellow Taoists seem to have even broken the titled void space. Such a loss naturally needs to be compensated. Ning Fan said in surprise. In his impression, the pure young ancestral master should be extremely greedy for money. Isn't it good to give him more money? Why did this person get angry? Humph. A gentleman loves money, but he must obtain it in a proper way. The agreement between me and fellow Taoist is 5,000 taels of gold. Not a single coin more. As for the titled void space, even though it has been broken, fellow Taoist doesn't have to worry too much about it because this matter isn't considered as a loss at all. As long as you have enough money, it can be restored in an instant. This is the ability of my titled void space. You can take the extra money back. The pure young ancestral master snorted coldly. With a wave of his palm, the storage pouch in his hand suddenly split into two in the midst of golden light. One of the storage pouches took out a portion of the heavenly Tao gold and returned it to Ning Fan angrily. I have underestimated fellow Taoist. Ning Fan smiled apologetically. Of course, he felt apologetic for treating the pure young ancestral master as a greedy person. When he scanned the storage pouch with his spirit sense, his face was suddenly filled with surprise. With a cultivation base like his senses were extremely sharp. With just a sweep of his spirit sense, he could already know the amount of heavenly Tao gold in the storage pouch without any error. The amount of heavenly Tao gold that the pure young ancestral master returned to him was not 5,000 taels. It was 4,999 taels. 1 tael short. Hee. Since fellow Taoist treats me as a greedy person, I will show you how greedy I am. This extra tael of heavenly Tao gold is just a small punishment for fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist can forget about getting it back. The pure young ancestral master said proudly. That expression of his made him feel as if taking one tael of heavenly Tao gold from Ning Fan was a great advantage. Ning Fan could not help but laugh. This pure young ancestral master is really an interesting person. I gave him an extra 5,000 taels of gold, but he rejected it righteously. Instead, he had to find some crooked excuses to embezzle one tael of heavenly Tao gold. Why bother? Or could it be that the difference between one tael and 4,999 taels is the ratio of greed and principle in his heart? Even though this person is greedy, he also has principles. That's all. Ha ha ha. Since this matter has been settled, I will take my leave first. I'm different from fellow Taoist. After all, I'm someone who relies on the heaven evasion coffin to survive. I can't leave the coffin for too long. Farewell. Farewell. The pure young ancestral master seemed to be afraid that Ning Fan would take back the one tael of heavenly Tao gold that he had taken. Thus, he left in a hurry as if he was fleeing from something. He even completely forgot about promoting the other few purity refining techniques to Ning Fan. It seems like it's time for me to leave too. Ning Fan looked at this world of moonlight and felt a little reluctant to leave. After all, Qing Ling's footprints had been left here before. However, he still had to leave after all. Perhaps one day, when he no longer has to deal with so many matters, he could return to this place and stay for a while. He could listen to Qing Ling's ancient song when the tide rises and the moon rises. Speaking of which, this dead moon is actually a treasure as well. Ning Fan looked at the gigantic moon beneath his feet. However, he did not take it away. If I take this moon away, there will no longer be any moonlight in the 4 heavens and 9 worlds. How regretful would that be? I'll just leave this moon here. He would not keep it. Of course, he would not allow others to keep it either. Judging from what that Taoist 9 sword said, it seems like there are other quasi-saints from the northern heaven who have come here before. If there are other quasi-saints who come here in the future, the Green Lotus Sword clan might be forcefully taken away by others after losing their clan leader. I need to leave something here. What should I leave behind in order to deter the quasi-saints from the northern heaven? Oh, right. I'll just leave this behind. Ning Fan smiled and pointed his finger. The moonlight in the sky immediately gathered and turned into a gigantic moon statue that stood at the bottom of the soul spring. It was his own statue. This statue even possessed a trace of divine ability. If others come to invade this place, this statue would certainly warn them. I'll just use my identity as an ancient great cultivator to deter others. If anyone dares to touch this moon recklessly despite my deterrence, don't blame me for being ruthless. Ning Fan gave another order to the Green Lotus Sword clan not to destroy this statue. Then, he left. How would the members of the Green Lotus Sword clan dare to destroy this statue? To cultivators who were above the immortal Emperor realm, as long as they had cultivated the descending technique, they could descend through certain ancient statues. The members of the Green Lotus Sword clan only thought that Ning Fan had created this moon statue to keep an eye on them. When they thought about how they would live under Ning Fan's surveillance for the rest of their lives, how would they dare to disobey him? Ning Fan turned into a ray of light and floated towards the outside world. All of a sudden, he stopped in his tracks. It was because there was an item that was slowly sinking in the moonlight water not far away. It was the pouch that the young lady called Fan Xiaoye had lost. Of course, it was impossible for Ning Fan to purposely help the young lady pick up the pouch. However, since he had already encountered it, he just conveniently picked it up. As a result, when he returned to the surface of the water, when he returned the pouch to Fan Xiaoye, countless ladies in the vast cold palace were so touched that they shed tears. Fan Xiaoye even hugged Ning Fan tightly and refused to let him go. She was no longer afraid of the ancient great cultivator getting angry. It seemed like she was not afraid of Ning Fan from the bottom of her heart. Don't be rude. Quickly let go of Senior Zhao. A few ancient cultivators of the vast cold palace had already climbed out of the heaven-avoiding coffin and were waiting for Ning Fan. When they saw Ning Fan being hugged by Fan Xiaoye, they were almost scared to death on the spot. Was an ancient great cultivator someone that ordinary people could simply touch? Just by touching them, they would be tainted by the mortal world. Old monsters who were at the quasi-saint realm and above hated the mortal world the most. This was simply a taboo for criminals. Ah! I'm too excited. Senior, please don't be angry. After Fan Xiaoye regained her senses, she was also shocked. Why did I hug Ning Fan so recklessly? What if Senior gets angry? It's alright. It's just a small matter. By the way, I have a question to ask you. Ning Fan looked at Fan Xiaoye deeply. He thought to himself that this lady was really similar to Si Yingyue, Su Manuye and Lin Qingyue. Senior, please ask. I will certainly tell you everything I know. Fan Xiaoye said with a blushing face. She was so happy that Senior took the initiative to talk to her. Why are you called Xiaoye? Because my mother said that I was born when the morning moon was about to end. She said that the moon was a good intention and it was the best name for me, so Xiaoye means that the morning moon is about to end, huh? The waxing moon, the full moon, the clear moon and the morning moon have already appeared for 4 months. I wonder how many more moons like this will appear. Ning Fan muttered to himself. His words were destined not to be understood by others. My mother also said that if I fail to become an immortal in the future, there will still be an afterlife. She hopes that I can become a moon in my next life. My mother is very good to me. When I was young, once Fan Xiaoye started talking, she would not stop. She did not care about Ning Fan's noble identity at all. Ning Fan, on the other hand, did not mind it at all. Just like before, he quietly left a mark on Fan Xiaoye's body and finally left. He did not know what these little moon girls represented. He just had a vague feeling that these moon girls seemed to be related to the dead moon at the bottom of the soul spring. Becoming a moon in my next life, huh? In the starry sky, Ning Fan's murmur could be heard from time to time. Chapter 1229. Becoming the moon in my next life, Ning Fan's murmurs could be heard from time to time in the starry sky. After everything was done, Ning Fan felt a trace of weakness in his devil blood. He could not help but stop moving. Standing in the void space, he took out a palm-sized wine urn from his storage pouch. It was the transformation of his ability. If he activates it, the urn could grow to the size of a small mountain. It was the urn that the Green Lotus Sword clan used to store the primordial blood wine. However, it turned out that Ning Fan had already taken the blood wine away secretly. With his abilities, no ordinary cultivator could stop or notice him when he used his teleportation ability to take something away. The consumption of my war devil blood is too heavy. Even my ancestral blood has been depleted. I still need to rely on this wine to recover my foundation. After keeping the urn, Ning Fan's expression suddenly turned gloomy. He flipped his hand again and an old item of the sword ancestor appeared in his palm. It was the item that Daoist Nine's sword left in his storage pouch when he died. It was a sword tassel that was used by a woman. This was the sword tassel of the 9th mountain that the sword ancestor used. You asked Ning Fan how he knew the name of the sword tassel. Of course, he asked it directly. What's your name? Sword tassel of the 9th mountain. Sword tassel of the 9th mountain. Which 9th mountain is the 9th mountain? The 9th mountain of the ancient desolation. The 9th mountain of the ancient desolation, you seem to be a magic treasure. But why can't I sense your grade? Do you have no grade in the first place or do you have the ability to hide your grade? Ning Fan asked again. I have a grade but it's not fixed. I'm on the same level as the sword. If the treasure is strong, I'm strong. If the sword is weak, I'm weak. The sword tassel answered. What does it mean by being on the same level as the sword? Could it be that this sword tassel can only be activated when it is tied to the sword? Ning Fan and Daoist Nine's sword fought until the end. The latter did not use this sword tassel because he could not figure out its usage. Even though Ning Fan had confirmed that the sword tassel did have a certain usage through their conversation, he still needed to try it out to find out its exact usage. He took out a 12 Nirvana postnatal magic treasure from his storage pouch and tied the sword tassel to it. Nothing happened. The sword tassel was useless. Then, he took out another low-grade innate sword. This sword was also taken from the treasure vault of the Green Lotus Sword clan. The sword tassel was also useless on this sword. Ning Fan even took out his true martial dual swords to try, but he still could not activate the power of the sword tassels. He had tried hundreds of sword-type magic treasures, but none of them could activate the power contained in the sword tassel. However, when Ning Fan tried to summon the ocean-defying sword and tie the sword tassel on it, gray chi suddenly rose from the sword tassel and soared into the sky. That was no ordinary gray gas. That gray chi actually contained a trace of the chi of the great wilderness. Ning Fan did not know what that chi was, but he could actually sense a trace of danger from it. At this moment, Ning Fan was in an uninhabited region of the starry sky. As soon as the gray chi soared into the sky, it immediately swept towards the tens of abandoned cultivation planets around him. Then, something terrible happened. The gray gas seemed to be able to devour all life force within its range, and several dozen abandoned planets were directly reduced to dust wherever it passed. That kind of ashes was not intentionally destroyed by a divine power, but by the gray mist, which had absorbed the last trace of star power from those abandoned stars. After sucking up dozens of stars, it still couldn't satisfy the gray gas's hunger. It continued to spread further into the starry sky. Finally, some low-level cultivation planets began to appear. Seeing that the gray gas was about to harm the innocent people, Ning Fan made a move in his mind and stopped it from spreading further. The gray gas seemed to be dissatisfied, but it did not resist Ning Fan's order. After all, it had devoured the life force of dozens of stars. When he looked at the sword tassel of the 9th mountain again, there was actually an immemorial sword intent awakening from it. That immemorial sword intent did not seem to belong to the sword ancestor. Instead, it seemed to be something that came with the sword tassel itself. Perhaps, the sword ancestor had also obtained this sword tassel by accident from somewhere. Under the enhancement of the immemorial sword intent, the power of the ocean-defying sword rose steadily. Eventually, its power became so strong that it went out of control. Even Ning Fan could not suppress the sword anymore and was nearly devoured by it. Ning Fan decided to unleash all the immemorial sword intent inside the ocean-defying sword. However, this slash was indeed a little earth-shattering. This slash produced a gray sword light with a human face on it. It looked demonic no matter how one looked at it. That human-faced sword light let out a hideous laugh. Wherever it passed, the uninhabited starry sky was directly cut into half. The great Tao of the heavens collapsed under its attack. The power of this single slash was definitely not any weaker than Taoist Nine Swords' life-risking sword. However, after that single slash, the immemorial sword intent of the ocean-defying sword was completely exhausted. If Ning Fan does not replenish his sword intent, he would not be able to produce the human-faced sword light anymore. Obviously, the method to replenish the immemorial sword intent could only be used once and not continuously. There was another noteworthy point. The end of the sword tassel was adorned with colorful tassels. There were originally more than 30 of them. However, after Ning Fan slashed out the human-faced sword light, one of the colorful tassels broke and turned into ashes, scattering across heaven and earth. I roughly understand now. This sword tassel can only unleash its power when it is tied to a sword. It can't be an ordinary magic treasure. It must be tied to a Dao weapon. This sword tassel absorbs the life force within its range by emitting gray chi and transforms it into immemorial sword intent. Then, it will unleash the attack of the human-faced sword. There is also a limit to the number of times it can be used. That limit is the number of colorful tassels. Therefore, this sword tassel can't be used without a limit. If all the colorful tassels are used up, the sword tassel itself might be destroyed. This sword tassel of the 9th mountain is really a sharp weapon. However, I can't bear to use it. Ning Fan let out a sigh. The significance of this item was extraordinary. It was one of the few old items left behind by the sword ancestor in this world. In the past, he did not understand the karma between him and the sword ancestor. When he obtained some scabbards of the sword ancestor by chance, he would just casually use them and did not cherish them. Now, however, he understood. When the sword ancestor disappeared from his side time and time again, he finally realized that there was once a silent lady who stood in the dusty time and protected him on the other side of reincarnation. She had left. He finally understood. Is it too late to cherish her now? It's better not to use this sword tassel. If I use it too much, this old item will no longer exist in this world. Ning Fan seemed to have made some kind of decision. Even though he still tied the sword tassel to the ocean-defying sword, he decided not to use the power of the sword tassel's human-faced slash. From then on, the sword tassel would only be used as an accessory to accompany his Dao sword. Ning Fan kept the ocean-defying sword and took out the other old items of the sword ancestor. Most of them were female accessories. After all, the sword ancestor was a lady. It was impossible for her not to like dressing up. However, the sword ancestor's hobby was a little strange. Her accessories were not luxurious, but all of them were related to swords. That soft jade bracelet was actually a soft sword when it was unfolded. The small pendant of the golden ornament could also turn into a flying sword to hurt the enemy after activating its ability. Even the silver earring was made into the shape of a small sword. Its design was quite unique. However, there was only one of it. Earrings usually came in pairs. Ning Fan did not know why Daoist Nine's sword only had one earring of the sword ancestor. He probably lost it. Is this what they mean by, I don't love the red but love the sword? Ning Fan found it funny when he thought about it. How much did Qing Ling like swords in the past? That's why he would also make the earring into a concealed weapon in the shape of a small sword. When he thought about it again, he felt a little suffocated. Too many years had settled in these old items. Those were the peaceful years that belonged to Qing Ling. Those years belonged to Qing Ling but not him. Ning Fan stared at the earring blankly. After staying silent for a long time, he finally smiled and carefully kept all the old items. He was not a sentimental person in the first place. It was fine for him to do it occasionally. Instead of reminiscing about the old items, it was better for him to reform Qing Ling's soul and revive her in this world again. At that time, he would naturally have a lot of time to have a good talk with this woman who had deep karma with him. He really looked forward to the arrival of that day. How good would it be if that day really comes? Before dawn, Ning Fan quietly returned to the Lost World Palace and returned to Bei Qing Han's residence. Very few people knew that another quasi-Saint Realm expert had fallen on this unusual night. Even though very few people knew about it, it did not mean that no one knew about it. As soon as Ning Fan returned to Bei Qing Han's residence, he suddenly noticed a change in something in his storage pouch. The thing that changed was his immortal position token. His immortal position was originally just a 5th grade golden immortal. However, it showed signs of advancing to the 4th grade heavenly supervisor. This is, Ning Fan looked at the token thoughtfully. After 10 breaths of time, the immortal position token officially advanced to the 4th grade heavenly supervisor token. However, the advancement of the immortal position token did not stop. After another 10 breaths of time, the token advanced to the 3rd grade and became a Star Lord token. I don't seem to have done anything special. Why would my immortal position token suddenly advance? Ning Fan was puzzled. Since he had doubts in his heart, he would just ask the token directly. Bei Xiaoman woke up. She did not forget that she was going to be her second sister's maid for 3 days. After she woke up, she helped her second sister wash up and then happily went to find Ning Fan. As soon as she opened the door of Ning Fan's room, she saw a strange scene. Ning Fan was sitting alone in the room, talking to a token that was shining with starlight. Tell me. Why did you suddenly advance? Oh. Are you saying that Daoist 9 sword, who I killed, also has an immortal position in the 4 fish sect and he's someone on the Star Lord ranking? What's the Star Lord ranking? I see. In other words, there are actually more than 28 ancient star constellation emperors of the 4 fish sect on the Star Lord ranking. There are many others. However, ordinary people don't know about the existence of the Star Lord ranking. All of a sudden, the air became very quiet. Ning Fan stopped talking to the token and raised his head. What he saw was Bei Xiaoman, who was in a petrified state. It's over. It's over. My little Fan is broken. Could it be that he made a mistake in his cultivation and fell into qi deviation? Otherwise, why would I be talking to this token? Bei Xiaoman felt like crying. She slowly walked towards Ning Fan and gave him a big hug. Her motherly instincts were triggered. Little Fan, don't worry. Even if I have to kneel on the Eternal Spring Island for 1,000 years, it's fine. I will definitely ask for an immortal pill to cure you. Are you misunderstanding something? Ning Fan was speechless. However, he did not push her away. Because he was sitting and she was standing, his face happened to be stuck to one of her soft objects. It was very comfortable. In order not to be treated as a lunatic by Bei Xiaoman, Ning Fan tried his best to explain to her in a language that she could understand. Yes. I believe you. Of course, I believe you. You're a normal person. All those who have mental problems say the same thing. Yes. Everything you said is right. You can talk to all living beings. You can take the heavens as your wife, the earth as your concubine, and all living beings as your cauldron. I know all of these. You've cultivated the yin-yang transformation, right? Bei Xiaoman tried her best to smile and comfort Ning Fan. However, her heart ached even more. Ning Fan sighed helplessly. Forget it. You can think whatever you want. In other words, you're finally willing to admit that you have mental problems? Bei Xiaoman heaved a sigh of relief. Among those with mental problems, the most difficult to cure were those who did not realize that they were ill. Since little Fan could still realize that he was ill, it meant that his condition was not serious and he could still be saved. Rest well. I will go to the Eternal Spring Island and ask for medicine for you now. Bei Xiaoman acted in a hurry. After saying that she wanted to ask for medicine, she immediately left the Lost World Palace and went to the Eternal Spring Island. The Eternal Spring Island was the holy land in the eyes of pill cultivators in the northern heaven. The master of the island was said to be a quasi-saint realm expert who lived in seclusion. From Bei Xiaoman's point of view, as long as she goes to the Eternal Spring Island, she would definitely have a way to ask for an immortal pill to cure Ning Fan. Ning Fan tried his best to persuade Bei Xiaoman to stop. In the end, even though Bei Xiaoman did not go to the Eternal Spring Island to cause a ruckus, she still caused a huge ruckus in Bei Qinghan's residence. All kinds of precious medicinal herbs that Bei Qinghan had collected in her residence were used by Bei Xiaoman to make soup for Ning Fan. Every single one of them had the ability to nourish the brain. After causing such a ruckus, Ning Fan did not have the time to study the changes of the token. After thinking for a while, he felt that the token was not important to him given his current status. Thus, he simply threw it back into his storage pouch and ignored it. Ning Fan did not care about the changes of his immortal position. However, it did not mean that the others did not care about it. Everyone knew that the immortal positions of the Four Majestic sect were divided into 9 grades. The 9th grade Strength Warrior, the 8th grade Immortal Guard and the 7th grade Mountain River Deacon were the lowest grade immortal positions. The 6th grade All-Heaven Guardian, the 5th grade Golden Immortal and the 4th grade Heavenly Supervisor were the mid-grade immortal positions. The 3rd grade Star Lord, the 2nd grade Tao Emperor and the 1st grade Spiritual Ancestor were the high-grade immortal positions. Everyone said that the cultivators with the highest immortal positions in the current world were the 28-star constellation Ancient Emperors of the Four Majestic sect. All of them were 3rd grade Star Lords. However, this was actually a misunderstanding. In the Northern Heaven, only those who were at the quasi-saint realm and above knew that there were more than 28-star constellation Ancient Emperors. In the Four Majestic sect, there was actually a Star Lord ranking. In the Northern Heaven, there were many unknown existences who held the Star Lord immortal positions. Ordinary people did not know about them, but the Star Lord ranking recorded their names. During the age of Dharma ending, the highest immortal position was only the Star Lord immortal position. This was true. However, there were also differences among the Star Lords. For example, the 28-star constellation Ancient Emperors could only be considered as low-grade Star Lords. Daoist 9 Sword of the Green Lotus Sword Clan, on the other hand, had become a nominal mid-grade Star Lord of the Four Majestic sect by chance. If it was an ordinary immortal position, a person with a lower immortal position could not replace the person with a higher immortal position by killing them. However, if one kills a mid-grade Star Lord or above, he could directly replace the Star Lord's immortal position. This was something that very few people knew. In the past, Daoist 9 Sword had murdered an unlucky quasi-saint who barged into the Soul Spring. That was how he replaced the Star Lord's immortal position and became a mid-grade Star Lord. Now that the tables had turned and Daoist 9 Sword was killed by Ning Fan, the mid-grade Star Lord position naturally fell into Ning Fan's hands. In the headquarters of the Four Majestic sect, old ancestor Lei Zhou was leisurely monitoring the starry sky crystal. Suddenly, he sensed something. His expression turned serious and he immediately went to the Star Lord's stele in the headquarters. When he took a look, he realized that the 27th Star Lord on the stele had been replaced. It was no longer Daoist 9 Sword whom he had never heard of. The 27th Star Lord had become Ning Fan. Of course, this was because Ning Fan did not hide the heavenly secret on purpose. He felt that it did not matter. Otherwise, even the Star Lord's stele might not be able to show his name. That scared me. It turns out that little Uncle Master killed an unknown Daoist 9 Sword and replaced him. Old ancestor Lei Zhe heaved a sigh of relief. The little Uncle Master he mentioned was naturally Ning Fan. He had never heard of that Daoist 9 Sword before. Since he was dead, he did not feel any heartache at all. As long as the high-grade Star Lords were not fighting for each other's Dao Art stars, it was not a big deal. I wonder what is the cultivation base of the Daoist 9 Sword whom little Uncle Master killed. I don't think he is a quasi-saint. If he is a quasi-saint, doesn't it mean that little Uncle Master has killed another quasi-saint? He. How can there be so many quasi-saints in the world that can be killed so easily? Old ancestor Lei Zhe smiled casually. However, he did not know that he had accidentally spoken the truth. The Daoist 9 Sword whom Ning Fan killed was really a quasi-saint. Jiu Xiaojiu had been waiting for an opportunity to sneak attack Ning Fan. Previously, when Ning Fan went to the inverting spring, she vaguely sensed that Ning Fan had something that she had been searching for. If Ning Fan was just an ordinary person, Jiu Xiaojiu would have already robbed him. However, Ning Fan was too powerful. Oh my god. Where did this little thief go last night? Why did he bring a trace of quasi-saint baleful qi with him when he returned? He hid it perfectly, but how could he hide it from me, Jiu Xiaojiu? Could it be that this little thief went out in the middle of the night to kill a quasi-saint? Could it be that he is really a legendary ancient great cultivator? Otherwise, how could he kill a quasi-saint in a single night? Jiu Xiaojiu was perfectly hidden in a well of a Dao spring in Beiqing Han's residence. Her true form was a clear wine brewed by a fourth-step-old monster in the ancient era. Due to her powerful background, her cultivation base was only at the void realm, but her techniques were extremely powerful. She was especially good at hiding. As long as there is water around her, she could hide herself perfectly in the water. Even Ning Fan would not be able to sense her presence in the water. Humph. So what if you are really an ancient great cultivator? I can't defeat you, but I can still play dirty, can't I? Just wait a little longer. I will definitely find a chance to get close to you. Jiu Xiaojiu waited and waited. Finally, she got the chance that she wanted. She could finally get close to Ning Fan. Wasn't Bei Xiaoman worried that Ning Fan's brain was damaged? Thus, Bei Xiaoman requested the pill refinement master in her residence to use the brain-nourishing spiritual herbs that she had plundered to brew a soup for him. Why was it boiled instead of concocting pills? Of course, it was because concocting pills required a lot of time. Ning Fan's condition was too serious. How could he afford to delay it for so long? Thus, he could only boil some medicinal soup to keep his condition in check. Sigh. The fourth miss really knows how to torture people. I am a dignified lead-grade pill refinement master, but I was actually sent to boil medicinal soup for her gigolo. It's really a waste of my talents. Suddenly, an old monster Dujin appeared beside the Dao Spring. He was a 9th Revolution pill refinement master hired by Bei Qing Han. Due to his superb pill concoction technique, he was considered as a somewhat famous person in the entire northern heaven. He came to the Dao Spring to fetch some water to boil soup. Everything he did was under Bei Xiaoman's order. With his status, he did not know that Ning Fan was the legendary ancient great cultivator, Zhao Jian. Thus, his tone was filled with dissatisfaction. However, he did not dare to disobey the orders of the dignified fourth miss of the Lost World Palace. This much water should be enough, right? The pill refinement master took enough Dao Spring from the well and left. He did not know that the female demon, Zhou Xiaojiu, was hiding in the Dao Spring that he took away. A few hours later, Bei Xiaoman came to Ning Fan with a bowl of piping hot medicinal soup. Just as she pushed the door open, she realized that the situation inside the room was a little strange. Why is mother in Ning Fan's room? After meeting Ning Fan at the toppling mountain, she had deliberately wanted to avoid him. Because of this reason, she did not come again even though Ning Fan had kept his promise to wait for her in Bei Qing Han's residence. She did not really want to see Ning Fan. There was always a barrier in her heart that she could not cross. Unfortunately, she received a piece of news. Ning Fan was sick. Moreover, he was very sick. His mind was muddled. Of course, this was a misunderstanding caused by Bei Xiaoman. However, Yuan Yao was still a little worried because spirit sense was too important to cultivators. Since Ning Fan's spirit sense had become muddled, it was definitely not a minor illness. Judging from the symptoms, it was more likely that he had been schemed against by a supreme being. According to rumors, there was a quasi-saint realm old monster who lived in seclusion on the Eternal Spring Island of the Northern Heaven. He was a divine doctor who practiced medicine to save the world. As long as a patient kneels on the Eternal Spring Island for 1,000 years, this quasi-saint realm expert would certainly give them medicine and cure them. Even Bei Xiaoman deeply believed in this rumor. However, Yuan Yao knew that this rumor was false. Cultivators usually had a physique that was immune to all kinds of diseases. How could they fall sick so easily? Patients often appeared in the Northern Heaven cultivation world. These patients were actually man-made. The culprit who caused them to fall sick was none other than that divine doctor himself. The master of the Eternal Spring Island, Daoist Chang Sang, was definitely not a kind person. This person seemed to have some kind of title that could cause plague to people. Therefore, when Yuan Yao heard that Ning Fan was sick, she suspected that he had been schemed against by Daoist Chang Sang. Thus, she hurriedly rushed over. How could she still have the time to hide from Ning Fan? Unfortunately, she had just arrived. Before she could say a few words to Ning Fan, she was already seen by her younger daughter. Immediately, she felt so guilty that she wanted to hide herself. Elder sister, why are you here? Bei Xiaoman originally wanted to call Yuan Yao mother. Luckily, she remembered Yuan Yao's request at the last moment and changed the way she addressed her. Bei Xiaoman did not understand why her mother would come here. Recently, she had been lost in love and her intelligence was obviously low. All of a sudden, Bei Xiaoman thought of a possibility. Recently, she had read a cultivation novel. The plot of the story was too similar to what was happening right now. In that story, there was a poor young man with a low cultivation base who fell in love with the eldest miss of a cultivation family. The young man and the eldest miss were deeply in love. However, because the young man's cultivation base was too low and his family background was too poor, this relationship was not acknowledged by the eldest Miss's family. In the end, the eldest Miss mother found the young man and told him, "If you leave my daughter, I will give you a good fortune. If you continue to pester me, I will send you to your death." The plot was too similar, all right? Bei Xiaoman was so anxious that she burst into tears. She kind of understood why her mother would look for Ning Fan. She wanted Ning Fan to back off and leave her. "Xiaoman, can you go out for a while? I have something to tell Ning Fan." Yuan Yao felt guilty. There were some words that she could not bear to let Xiaoman know. "As I thought. Mother is avoiding me because she wants to chase little Fan Fan away." Bei Xiaoman was in a dilemma. She had always listened to her mother the most. Now that her mother asked her to go out, she certainly did not dare to stay here. However, she could not bear to abandon Ning Fan after making use of him. "Wait. What are you holding in your hand?" Yuan Yao suddenly asked curiously. "It's a medicinal soup. It can nourish the brain. I prepared it for little Fan Fan." When Bei Xiaoman thought of Ning Fan's illness, her eyes immediately turned red. She really felt sorry for little Fan Fan. A medicinal soup of this level is probably useless. Yuan Yao sighed softly. If Ning Fan's illness was really the result of Taoist Chang Sang's scheme, how could it be cured by ordinary medicinal soup? I can leave this place and not disturb your conversation. However, you must make sure that little Fan Fan drinks this medicinal soup. You have to promise me. Under Bei Xiaoman's insistence, the medicinal soup was left behind in the end. As for Bei Xiaoman herself, Yuan Yao found an excuse to send her away. She was sent far away and directly sent to northern Qing Han residence. This medicinal soup seems to be. Ning Fan glanced at the medicinal soup on the table imperceptibly and then retracted his gaze. He seemed to have seen through something, but at the same time, he seemed to have seen through nothing. Even though it was just a casual glance, it still gave Zhou Xiaojiu a great shock. How scary! This little thief's gaze is sharper than a knife and colder than ice. I was so scared that I almost exposed my qi. Finally, Zhou Xiaojiu calmed herself down and continued to hide in the medicinal soup. Initially, she wanted to attack Ning Fan immediately. However, Yuan Yao's next words greatly piqued her interest. Thus, she was not in a hurry to make her move. "I heard that you are sick." Yuan Yao finally opened her mouth and said softly. Of course, she was talking to Ning Fan. However, Zhou Xiaojiu felt very happy after hearing what Ning Fan said. She hated Ning Fan so much that she was invincible. Now that Ning Fan was sick, of course, she would feel happy. Why didn't this little thief die of illness? It's not like that. It's Xiaoman who misunderstood him. Ning Fan originally wanted to say that. However, when he met Yuan Yao's concerned eyes, he suddenly changed his words and did not say that. Ning Fan actually lied and admitted that he was a lunatic. Does this place hurt twice every day in the morning and at dusk? Yuan Yao's heart ached when she heard Ning Fan's words. She tapped the top of Ning Fan's head with her soft palm. Of course, Ning Fan's head would not feel any pain. However, if he were to put on an act, he would have to go all the way. It's all right. It's not particularly painful. Ning Fan intentionally sighed. You're lying. I heard that you are suffering from the head plague of the Master of Eternal Spring Island. That kind of pain can directly kill a true immortal. Why do you have to be so stubborn? That's right. You were just this stubborn in the past. Yuan Yao only thought that Ning Fan was putting on a brave front. She was already 100% sure that Ning Fan had been tricked by Taoist Chang Sang of Eternal Spring Island. If it wasn't because her cultivation base was too weak, she really wanted to kill her way to Eternal Spring Island and help Ning Fan vent his anger. That pitiful Taoist Chang Sang did not do anything but take the blame. It was also because of this incident that Ning Fan finally had a trace of interest towards the so-called Eternal Spring Island. What is this Eternal Spring Island? Ning Fan asked. Bei Xiaoman seemed to have mentioned it before. You don't have to ask too much. I will help you handle this matter. Even if I have to kneel on the island for 1,000 years, I will certainly get the antidote for you. Yuan Yao said resolutely. Ning Fan really did not know whether he should feel touched or ridicule her. Why do these two sisters, Bei Yao and Bei Xiaoman, even their tone is so similar. Should I say that they are indeed biological sisters? At the end of the day, I am more touched than touched. In this world, how many people are willing to kneel for 1,000 years and beg for others? Ning Fan thought for a while. He probably would not kneel. It was not because he could not let go of his dignity. Instead, it was because his personality was born that way. When faced with the same problem, he would only choose to use force to overcome force. Whatever immortal pills he wanted, he would naturally not kneel and beg for them. He would either trade with others or snatch them by force. He would always get them. If he could not get them, he could only snatch them. If he could not snatch them, he could only snatch them by force. This was the style of a devil that was personally taught to him by the old devil. Actually, I'm not sick. I was just joking with you just now. Ning Fan could not bear to tease Yuan Yao anymore. However, Yuan Yao did not believe him. She still felt that Ning Fan was putting on a brave front and was being stubborn. Sigh, Yuan Yao lowered her head and saw the bowl of medicine on the table. After thinking for a while, she decided that even though this medicine was not suitable for treating his illness, it could still nourish his brain. Thus, she decided to persuade Ning Fan to drink it. Fine. You should drink this medicine first. Yuan Yao planned to persuade Ning Fan to drink the medicine. This scared Zhou Xiaozhou to death. She was hiding in the medicinal soup. Her true form was Qing Shui Jiu. If Ning Fan drinks it, what if he has a powerful ability and refines her? It was not that she had never thought of crawling into Ning Fan's stomach and causing a ruckus. However, who was Ning Fan? He seemed to be an ancient great cultivator, all right? Such a risk was just too great. No. I can't wait any longer. If this little bastard really drinks it, my life will be over. Zhou Xiaozhou no longer waited for an opportunity. She decided to attack Ning Fan immediately and sneak attack him. As a result, a trace of strange wine fragrance suddenly drifted out from the medicinal soup. The power of the wine fragrance this time was far greater than the previous time. This time, the wine fragrance even contained a trace of Qing Shui Jiu's third step power. What's going on? My body. Yuan Yao was hit by the wine fragrance. The wine fragrance of the third step easily made her drunk. Ning Fan was already prepared for it. How could he be hurt by Zhou Xiaozhou's wine fragrance? Seeing that Zhou Xiaozhou finally could not help but attack him, Ning Fan immediately snorted coldly and used the finger-pointing heavenly technique to freeze Zhou Xiaozhou in the medicinal soup. It's impossible. You already knew that I was here. Zhou Xiaozhou was scared out of her wits. She was frozen to death. She was captured by Ning Fan. Female demon, tell me your purpose. Ning Fan was not an idiot. This female demon had come to him time and time again. She definitely had a purpose. The strange thing was that his mind-reading technique was actually ineffective against her. Thus, he could only ask her directly. Humph. Just kill me. I won't tell you. Zhou Xiaozhou was rather stubborn. Kill you? After I kill you, you can reincarnate to another place and be reborn with the help of the wine qi. So, why would I kill you? Why don't I just drink you? Green light flashed across Ning Fan's eyes as if he had seen through all of Zhou Xiaozhou's abilities. As soon as Zhou Xiaozhou heard that Ning Fan wanted to drink her, her face turned pale. Why you dare? If you drink me, Grandpa Fish Lord will certainly take revenge for me. No, I didn't say Grandpa Fish Lord. This matter has nothing to do with him. Zhou Xiaozhou originally wanted to use the tiger's skin to scare Ning Fan. However, when she thought about how Ning Fan could even kill a quasi-saint realm being, she thought that he might be a great cultivator from the ancient times. If Grandpa Fish Lord is involved in this matter, won't he be in trouble? She immediately changed her words. Fish Lord? Ning Fan frowned slightly. Just as he was about to ask about Zhou Xiaozhou's background in detail, his lips suddenly felt warm and something kissed him. Hot. So hot. Yuan Yao was drunk. Am I drunk again? Ning Fan's eyes flashed. He would never admit that the reason why he allowed Zhou Xiaojiu to stay in the medicinal soup was because he wanted something similar to this to happen. In that case, how could he still have the mood to play with Zhou Xiaojiu? After sealing her up, he threw her into the profound Yin world and locked her up. Then, all sorts of strange things happened in the room. Bei Xiaoman was sent away. However, Bei Qinghan was still there. Bei Qinghan stood outside Ning Fan's room with a shocked expression. That's right. Ning Fan's room was equipped with a restrictive formation. The people outside could not hear what was happening inside. However, one mustn't forget that this was her house. With her shrewdness, she would surely have a way to find out what was happening inside the room. Oh my god. Mother and Ning Fan actually. Interesting. This is too interesting. Things are really as I expected. What kind of posture is this? Do you have to be so rough? Ho 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 ho. Mother has actually been placed in such a position. Now, I can really see everything. Bei Qinghan still wanted to continue peeking. Suddenly, a breeze blew out from the room and landed on her body, directly blowing her thousands of li away. She was directly blown out of Western Palace Island and into the Sea of Time. Little girl, you are still too young. These scenes are not suitable for you to watch. Ning Fan's displeased voice could be heard in the breeze. It was also because Bei Qinghan peeked. He was only giving her a small punishment because he was concerned about Bei Yao and Xiaoman's reputation. Bei Qinghan exploded with anger. You slept with my younger sister and my mother, but you still don't allow me to watch. You're shameless. What? What did you call Yao? Did you say, mother? Ning Fan's voice was like a thunderclap. He finally knew why she had been avoiding him all this while. However, the arrow was already knocked on the bowstring. He really couldn't care less anymore. With his intelligence, even though he had guessed the truth in an instant, he could no longer stop. How could he stop? Since he couldn't stop, he might as well go all the way. After the storm passed, Yuan Yao felt so ashamed that she wanted to die. She had sworn to avoid Ning Fan. Who can tell her why she slept with him again? Moreover, she actually slept with him for real this time. I remember that I seemed to have smelled the fragrance of wine just now. That fragrance was very familiar. I remember now. The one who did it was that female cultivator whom I met on Reverse Mountain. Yuan Yao hated Zhou Xiaojiu to the core. If it wasn't for her, why would she get drunk again and do that to Ning Fan again? Ning Fan, stop now. Quickly get out of here. Yuan Yao, who had sobered up naturally, did not want to continue. I heard that dual cultivation can cure the head plague. Ning Fan gave Yuan Yao a reason. He knew that Yuan Yao needed a reason to cross the threshold in her heart. Otherwise, this stubborn woman would certainly be drowned in guilt. What? I was schemed against by the Tao Master of Eternal Spring and got the head plague. Dual cultivation with you can cure the head plague. That way, my head won't hurt anymore. Is this reason enough? Ning Fan's non-existent mental illness became the reason to comfort Yuan Yao instead. Really? When talking about Ning Fan's illness, Yuan Yao's heart softened a little. The guilt in her heart also lessened a little. Anyway, it had already happened. If this can really alleviate Ning Fan's illness, then I'll just bear with it for a while longer, then hurry up. Yuan Yao closed her eyes and pleaded with a soft voice. All right. Yuan Yao only left Bei Qinghan residence in a bad mood when it was late at night. She swore that she would never trust Ning Fan again. She had clearly asked Ning Fan to hurry up, but he still dragged it for so long, causing her to embarrass herself and making her beg for mercy continuously. Since it had already happened, it would be impossible for her not to blame herself. However, when she thought of Ning Fan's head plague, Yuan Yao could not be bothered to blame herself anymore. In the future, she would still stay far away from Ning Fan. However, The matter regarding Ning Fan's head plague also needed to be resolved properly. Fine. I'll first send someone to probe the disciples of Eternal Spring Island and see if it's possible for the master of Eternal Spring Island to let Ning Fan go and retract his scheme. Yuan Yao let out a faint sigh. She did not like to lower her head to beg others. However, if it's for the sake of the people she cared about, she would not mind doing so. She treated her 4 daughters the same way, and it was the same for Ning Fan. However, she did not know if the other party would let Ning Fan go.